The Dark Angels are considered amongst the most powerful and secretive of the Loyalist Space Marine chapters. As the first legion of the original 20 created during the first founding, they hold a unique and prestigious position in the records of the Imperium. Although they pledge unwavering loyalty to the Emperor of Mankind, their actions and hidden objectives often appear contradictory to their professed loyalty. It has been noted that the Dark Angels are driven by an overwhelming need to atone for an ancient crime and betrayal committed over 10,000 years ago during the end of the Horus Heresy. Since their inception as the First Legion, the Dark Angels have stood at the forefront of the Space Marines, which has led them to be a proud chapter with traditions and rituals that can be traced back to the earliest days of the Imperium of Man. However, the origins of the Dark Angels remain cloaked in secrecy, as few Imperial records of the chapter's very beginnings still exist, and there are scant mentions in their role during the Emperor's Great Crusade, in particular during the earliest parts of the 31st millennium. It is also important to remember that most records of their deeds during the earliest parts of the Horus Heresy have been expunged from history. Yet a persistent legend tells of a time when the Dark Angels teetered on the brink of heresy, and an act of the most grievous betrayal, which dishonored the entirety of the First Legion's valor, leaving an indelible stain upon their honor and the honor of all their successor chapters. Such is their shame that from that moment onwards, the Dark Angels and their unforgiven successors have striven for absolution for the sins of millennia past. Now you may ask, what is a terrible secret that the Dark Angels hide? Turns out that during the Horus Heresy, some of their brethren were seduced by the allure of chaos. The renegades ultimately were defeated in a climactic battle that destroyed the Dark Angels Legion's homeworld of Caliban. However, many of the traitorous Dark Angels survived, as they were cast throughout space and time by the direct intervention of the Chaos Gods. These survivors are known only to a few of the Dark Angels who are granted knowledge of the existence of the Fallen. In the eyes of the chapter's leaders, there is only one path for redemption, and that is that all the Fallen must be found and either made to repent for their actions and sins, or slain for the betrayal. This treachery and betrayal has become the Dark Angels' hidden shame, to the point that their secret mission to destroy all of the Fallen is now believed to be their only hope for salvation and redemption. A mission that only the Dark Angels and their successor chapters, along with maybe the Emperor himself, know about, though he is interred in the Golden Throne. Thus, even if he were privy to the chapter's dark history, word would not spread. As they continue their relentless pursuit, the Dark Angels have become a chapter who embodies the tension between honor and shame, loyalty and secrecy, as these aspects define their very existence. It must be noted that within the chapter's structure, there are many levels that individuals may gradually ascend, and with each new level, the knowledge that they are granted increases, if only slightly, as they learn more and more about the truth of the Dark Angels' origins. However, only the highest ranking members, known as the Inner Circle, are privy to the entirety of their shameful secret which they have maintained for over 10,000 years. It is also important to know that the Dark Angels hold more battle honors than any other chapter, their only equal being their successors. The chapter itself had long fought across the length and breadth of the Imperium's entirety and beyond against every foe that has ever beset mankind. The Dark Angels have held off orc wogs, crushed planetary uprisings, and saved entire star systems from incursions of the ruinous powers. Their campaigns have taken them through searing deserts, the cold void of space, dense cavernous alien jungles, and even the depths of the wildest of underhives. Yet while chapters such as the Blood Angels and Ultramarines are lauded whenever they fight, the Dark Angels shun laurels and turn their back upon adoration. Even though the chapter has stood side by side with every major arm of the Imperium's military, it has always maintained a distance and aloofness that sets its brethren further apart from the bulk of humanity, and even from other Space Marines. Marines. When the Dark Angels join a larger force to execute a great war or an imperial crusade, they do so according to their own unfathomable goals. When the Dark Angels force is committed to such a conflict, it will remain aloof. Its officers keep their own counsel on matters of tactics and strategy, preferring to maintain their own lines of communication separate from the rest of the Imperium, and even their own supply sources. This includes when dealing with battle brothers of other Astartes chapters. The Dark Angels will often remain sullen and quiet at the Space Marines command councils and tactical briefings, though this does not suggest that they are any less effective or active on the battlefield. When the Dark Angels undertake operations alongside other chapters, it is quite common for them to do so with others amongst the so-called Unforgiven, successor chapters of the original Dark Angels, more so than it would be to join chapters such as the Blood Angels or the Imperial Fists. The successors of the First Legion seem to have maintained an especially close relationship with their progenitors, especially with their own members of the Inner Circle. This complex history and hierarchy has been informed by the Dark Angels' secretive nature, as they remain a chapter apart, driven by their shame, in a relentless quest for redemption, much like a monastic order of old, as they continue their eternal vigil. One of the things that sets the Dark Angels apart from most other chapters is a unique command network which directly ties the Dark Angels with all the Unforgiven chapters, designed so they can utilize the bulk of what amounts to a pseudo-legion to great effect. There is no presumption that the leaders of the Dark Angels have any interest in enforcing their superiority over those of the other Unforgiven chapters. Rather, the leaders work together rather closely and, if needed, elect one of their members as a nominal commander for the duration of any campaign, once this communication network establishes the need. In one matter, however, the officers of the Dark Angels do hold superiority over those of the Unforgiven chapters. This is in the Hunt of the Fallen. When hunting those turncoat Dark Angels who escaped the Fall of Caliban, the Unforgiven operate under the auspice of the highest ranked of the Inner Circle, and the very highest of these is the Supreme Grand Master himself, Chapter Master of the Dark Angels. Currently, it's Azrael. More recently, with the return of their Primarch, it would be the Lion himself. Through the machinations of the Unforgiven's Inner Circle, its members are entirely vigilant and remain in a never-resting, never-ending hunt for the fallen. Even though the knowledge is withheld from the majority of their brethren, they will still hunt the fallen when commanded. The result of post-battle debriefings with those who should not know of the fallen's identity, even within the chapter, is post-battle psi-induced stress purges and information being fed back directly to the Inner Circle's upper echelons, as any sign of the fallen's presence is analyzed and scrutinized to an extreme degree. In addition, the Dark Angels chaplains are permanently attached to a company, allowing them to hear confessions of their battle brothers and keep a close watch for any signs of the fallen. When such traces are discovered, the Inner Circle moves without hesitation, completely redeploying the Unforgiven and abandoning anything and anywhere they may be, in order to task them with retaking their target. In most cases, it is the Raven Wing that locates the Fallen's activity, and it is the Deathwing that delivers the killing blow. However, on occasion, entire Dark Angel strike forces have been recalled and relocated from campaigns and committed to engage an enemy that only the highest ranking officials have any knowledge of. While a great deal of the Unforgiven's efforts and resources are committed to the hunt of the Fallen, the majority of their brethren have no knowledge on the matter. Rather, the Dark Angels and their successors are constantly warned against the words of heretics, and their chapter dogma exalts the virtues of the eternal hunt of those who forswear the most powerful of oaths. The company's chaplains serve greatly in this function, as their sermons tell of legendary figures betrayed by their own, often having fought in battles far from their homes. Numerous such tales exist, and each is revealed as a part of a slow and deliberate pattern in order to have the brothers contemplate on their place in the chapter. But it is only upon the battle brother's ascension to the inner circle that he is told anything approaching the truth, even though each of these tales is drawn from said truth. And even then, there are some secrets that are only known at the very highest of tiers. In particular, there is a great focus on how much the shame of the Dark Angels a battle brother may be allowed to know is completely dependent upon his station within the chapter and how far he has gone to prove himself to the agents of the inner circle. A battle brother may have fought the fallen unwittingly, believing his foe is yet another vile traitor who is worthy only of death. Perhaps their sergeant knew more, or the lieutenant, or even the captain. Certainly his company master did, but he himself will never know until he is inducted into the inner circle. Conversely, there are some higher ranked brothers who, despite exemplary service, are never inducted into the inner circle. Perhaps the chaplains harbor some small amount of doubt, or even have reason to believe the individual would not be able to bear the terrible truth of what occurred during the end of the Horus Heresy. Such Astartes, despite an exemplary record, would be unlikely to progress much further, for at the highest levels of authority, the chapter is ever engaged upon the hunt for the fallen. Now on to the origins of the Dark Angels. While their history is shrouded in mystery, they stand as the Emperor's first Space Marine Legion, forged in the Crucible of War during the infancy of the Imperium, and having operated within the earliest days of the Great Crusade. They stand as the prototype for what would become the Legions Astartes. Wielding some of the most advanced archaeotech possible and plasma weapons allowed them to be set apart from other formidable warriors. Known simply as the Angels of Death or the Sixth Host back then, they were the vanguard of the Emperor's conquests, dominating the final days of the Unification Wars with unparalleled prowess. In this era, the First Legion, as they would later be known, rose to unprecedented power and favor under the Emperor's ever-watchful gaze. However, their supremacy would be challenged by brutal conflicts during the Great Crusade, particularly the devastating Randang genocides, which greatly depleted their ranks and tested their resolve like never before. Yet it was during these trials that the Dark Angels found their renewal, as they were reunited with the Primarch Lionel Johnson and incorporated fresh blood from his homeworld of Caliban into their legion. Caliban, a death world teeming with martial traditions and fierce warrior orders, proved fertile grounds for the legion's regeneration. Its harsh environments and warrior ethos helped shape the Dark Angels into an even more formidable set of warriors, as they embraced their destinies as killers in the service of the Imperium. Their battles, often against unspeakable horrors lurking in the void, remained largely unrecorded. Their sacrifices, known only to those who bore witness to their valiant deeds. As it seems, the true origins of the Dark Angels and many of their practices will forever remain veiled in secrecy. However, we do assuredly know that they were the prototype that the Emperor conceived for the Space Marine Legions, and their creation laid the groundwork for the use of Primarch DNA in order to create and implant the traits necessary in the creation of these transhuman warriors. And in the process of their creation, a few stable proto-Astartes were made. These initial creations were referred to as the primordial strain and formed the foundation for the First Legion, laying the groundwork for the subsequent Space Marines. And despite the secrecy surrounding their origins, the Dark Angels stand as a testament to the Emperor's grand design and his enduring legacy, as theirs is a history etched in blood and sacrifice, a saga of duty and honor that continues to shape the very fate of humanity and the galaxy beyond. The inception itself of the Dark Angels occurred through the drawing in of many recruits from the nomadic youth of conquered adversaries on Terra. And unlike their counterparts in other legions, the Dark Angels would bear no singular genetic imprint, as their ranks essentially reflected a mosaic of the diverse cultural backgrounds that still remained on Terra. These early recruits would be handpicked from the finest available stock and brought to the Emperor from the resilient infantry of Albia to the adept cavalry warriors of the Anatolic steppes. Each infusion of aspirants enriched the Legion with a kaleidoscope of combat experiences. The First Legion thus became a crucible for the brutal wisdom and tactics developed from Old Knight, as they were distilled into a new arsenal of warfare for the Emperors. The new unity in those early years, created by the birth of the first proto-warriors of the First Legion, led them to be encouraged to leave their old names behind and embrace a new form of unity, which led to the adoption of names from ancient legends. The first roles of honor given to these proto-Astartes were names like Gilgamesh, Heracles, Trekon, Hangsit. This practice, combined with a grim aspect granted by their gene seed, quickly earned them a reputation as a band of gods, all cast from a singular potent mold. These would be the uncrowned princes. Initially, these warriors fought in small groups within the Emperor's hosts, mastering both their original skills and the new techniques taught by the Imperial laboratories of the Biotechnical Division. They became known as the Uncrowned Princes, or simply the Crown, after a certain amount of time, a title that inspired unity and no uncertain lack of arrogance, and it reflected their place amongst the Emperor's chosen, which caused them to gain ranks of leadership within their brotherhood of the Legions Astartes. Amidst the amalgamation of the cultures from the proto-warriors that created the Dark Angels Legion were a myriad of ancestral identities which melded into what would be the Emperor's finest fighting force. Fighting as the elite vanguard of the Emperor's armies, these warriors, led by the uncrowned princes, embodied all the aspects that the Emperor had found missing within the Thunder Warriors. It was within the Legion's earliest moments that the genesis of the hosts, which were quintessential for the formation of the First Legion, came to be, laying the groundwork for what would later become the hexagrammation wings under their Primarch, Lionel Johnson. These hosts were informal groups within the early companies, which each adapted particular battle doctrines from their diverse origins in order to create cohesive cadres suitable for the Emperor's transhuman armies. Unlike traditional military structures, these hosts were not bound by company or command, and existed throughout the Legion, offering their expertise as needed. In the formative years of the First Legion, the number of hosts exceeded those later formed under the hexagrammation, and historical records from the Unification Wars indicate the existence of up to 18 distinct formations, each identified by unique heraldry. These hosts were pivotal in shaping the Legion's early tactical versatility. One notable engagement within the Third Siege of Antioch in 603 M30 saw the deployment of 9 distinct hosts from across separate companies. Despite numbering fewer than 30 warriors each, these hosts demonstrated considerable tactical overlap and versatility in their methods of combat, which were instrumental in breaching the walls of this ancient enclave. The early hosts would go on to exemplify the resilience of the First Legion, showcasing a blend of diverse martial traditions, flexibility, and the collective wisdom of warriors who had already gained an incredible amount of experience, which were key to the Emperor's campaigns, as these hosts would lay a robust foundation for the later Dark Angels and their successor chapters, as their legacy would endure as the Legion evolved under the guidance of Lionel Johnson into a highly specialized and formidable force within the Imperium. Over time, the chaotic proliferation of hosts within the First Legion would be gradually consolidated into smaller and more focused, specialized groups. In those formative years, with their brother legions still in their nascent stages, the First Legion served as a testing ground for various tactics and doctrines that would later become the Principia Bellica, which would be implemented within the other legions. As the Legion grew significantly larger in order to engage in small-scale combat actions more fluidly, some more specialized hosts became obsolete and rendered unnecessary by the warriors who had become particularly adept in those styles of warfare. Others were eradicated by the brutal nature of the 30th millennium and the warfare encountered by those within, in particular due to the inadequacies of the methods employed. Far from weakening the Legion, this process of bloody evolution left it stronger and caused the Legion to become a refined weapon honed to perfection by the battles fought on Terra. This period of relentless combat also created a deep bond amongst the disparate warriors of the early Legion. Their sense of superiority and distinction was instilled by the Emperor's servants who had trained them and reinforced by the awe they inspired within those who they fought alongside. Eventually, it would come time for the fall of the Thunder Warriors, as the First Legion, like all Legions Astartes, was intended to replace the Thunder Warriors due to the Proto-Astartes, known as the Thunder Warriors, being an unstable experiment designed for the brutal exigencies of the Unification Wars, meaning the Thunder Warriors were tools needed for their time, rather unrefined and savage weapons capable of matching the grim tyrants and the debauched potents that had inherited old Earth during the Age of Strife. Despite their greater physical power, the Thunder Warriors were a rough breed, individually perhaps more powerful than their new transhuman kin. However, due to how they were created, they were unable to quell their fury and work in any form of unison. They were in essence a mob, a storm of fury and blades, designed to overwhelm their foes through sheer ferocity. In stark contrast, the Legions Astartes were a true army, their unity and discipline enabling them to withstand any onslaught. This crucial difference marked an evolutionary leap from the brutal force of the Thunder Warriors to the sophisticated, coordinated might of the Space Marine Legions. The transition from Thunder Warrior to Astartes signified a pivotal moment in the Emperor's grand design. It was a shift from raw chaotic power necessary to subjugate the war-torn Terra as quickly as possible to the disciplined strategic force required to expand and hold the burgeoning Imperium. And the First Legion, as the first and prototype, bore the brunt of this transition, embodying the lessons learned and the refinements made in the Crucible of War, which would eventually lead to the disappearance of the Thunder Warriors from the annals and records of Imperial history. Their end remains mostly shrouded in countless tales and theories, with some even believing there are still yet the remnants of the Thunder Warriors amongst the Imperium. There are many such tales. One more well-known example originates from the nomadic tribes dwelling near Mount Ararat, who recorded an ominous army clad in grey, awaiting the return of the wary Thunder Warriors. According to the legend, rather than honoring their valiant predecessors, these warriors unleashed their thunderous volleys of death upon the exhausted Thunder Warriors, as they would go on to eliminate them. While this greatly diverges from the heroic narratives propagated by remembrancers, this grim tale aligns with the ruthless nature of the Emperor's grand design. However, though lacking in evidence, the anecdotal accounts from years later during the Great Crusade offers intriguing insights, including reports indicating the relentless pursuit of renegade Thunder Warriors by the fleets of the First Legion, who had diverged from their course to annihilate these remnants. This singular obsession hinted at a deeper, more personal motive, perhaps driven by a sense of shame or duty to rectify past failures. Another ancient source suggests a darker turn, asserting that the Thunder Warriors, resentful of their shortened lifespan and perceived betrayal by the Emperor due to the creation of the Adeptus Astartes, turned against their creator in a desperate bid for vengeance. And in response to this, a cadre of custodians, led by Constantine Valdor and aided by swarms of prototype Astartes from the First Legion, were sent to ruthlessly quell this rebellion. However, which story is true is largely shrouded by the First Legion's secrets, coupled with the Imperial decree which obscures many of their early campaigns, rendering the truth of their involvement with the end of the Thunder Warriors as an elusive enigma. And so began the dawn of the Legions of Astartes, heralded as a new era in the Emperor's grand design. Amongst them, the First Legion was the one who would stand as the vanguard, a force of unmatched power and potential. With 10,000 transhuman warriors, they had eclipsed their nascent brethren, who stood in mere hundreds in number. It was at Samkrend on Terra, amidst the final echoes of the Unification Wars, that the First Legion emerged en masse, led by the Emperor himself. Here, the blood-soaked fields of Samarkand was where the Legions of Astartes faced their official inaugural trial as an army. Against them stood the formidable Ugudu Hul, 2,000 gene-forced warriors whose venomous blood and superhuman strength made them the scourge of the Upper Asiatic Basin. In the crucible of battle, the First Legion proved their mettle, performing even better than the Thunder Warriors. For 10 grueling hours, the armies clashed, and echoes reverberated against the desolate landscape until Samarkand lay in ruins, leading to the great king of Akend to be defeated. Hector Thrain, the newly appointed Grand Master of the Legion, emerged as the architect of this victory, his triumph immortalized as he was bestowed with the title of Sinestra of the Emperor, the left hand of Terra's warlord. In the aftermath, the Emperor decreed the erasure of the harrowing conflict from records. Yet the legend of the First Legion's first triumph endures. Their valorous stand at Samarkand would hasten the recruitment and training of the new legions, as their prowess in combat had been validated in this crucible of war. And the First Legion emerged from the inferno of battle, their reputation cast in the shadow of legends, as a testament to their master's grand design. As time would go on, the First Legion's victories were noted but shrouded in secrecy and whispered in dread. From the desolate Fortress 31 in the Thulan Wastes to the fiery crucible known as Karakon on Sendra's Cairo-volcanic mountains, the First Legion waged an unending war against the most abominable forces who stood against unity. Their singular objective: annihilate all those who stood before the Emperor's path. Their battles veiled in horror as they confronted Xenos nightmares and psychic aberrations that defied comprehension. Such was the terror of their adversaries that records of these conflicts are intentionally obscured and relegated to mere echoes in the histories of the Imperium. Endowed with unprecedented access to the Imperial Palace's forbidden armories, the First Legion would be renowned for wielding mankind's darkest weaponry with impunity. Under Grand Master Hector Thrain, cities like Kundur and Malay were razed to ash, their ruins a testament to the Legion's merciless resolve. Gene-phage mutations purged from Euclidus and Saturn's moon of the vile Knave infestation. The first left barren landscapes as monuments to their grim victories. Their reputation seemed to precede them, as the first earned the morbid reverence of humanity's ranks. They were not celebrated heroes, but feared harbingers of death, rumored to even be death's own hand in the mortal realm. As superstition swelled around them, due to soldiers whispering and bearing charms along with wards near them, despite the ideals of the imperial truth, the First Legion was viewed not as saviors or even mortals of any form, but as avatars of destruction brought into the mortal realm in order to serve the Emperor. In the shadow of their presence, fear and awe mingled, for where the First Legion tread, only death would follow, as a silent witness to their inexorable march towards victory. The First Legion's march was not without an eerie aura, one which would seem to remain even 10,000 years later, as those who have fought alongside them often met a grisly fate. their ranks torn asunder by the merciless adversaries that the Legion sought to vanquish. Some units met untimely ends, consumed by the very horrors they were meant to conquer, while others simply vanished without a trace. Yet the First Legion remained, as rumors would only be silenced once the First Legion themselves decided to speak up, ensuring that no whisper of foes reached the ears of those left behind. In response to their grim reputation, the warriors of the First would embrace the macabre image, donning the guise of death itself by adorning their armor with somber symbols of mortality. Added to this, there was the self-imposed isolation becoming tantamount to a badge of honor for the legionaries, a solemn sacrifice they viewed to shield their comrades from the unspeakable horrors they faced on the battlefield. Yet to outsiders, particularly the brethren from other legions, this aloofness seemed more akin to prideful arrogance. However, the First Legion was undeterred by such perceptions, as the masters of the First Legion remained steadfast in their ways. The Legion itself, cloaked in a shroud of dark rumors as they waged war on the battlefield, while other legions reveled in the glory of triumph and conquest, the First operated in veritable shadows, entrusted with the Emperor's most dire and clandestine missions. They were the Emperor's left hand, wielding their grim aspect with ruthless efficiency, all hidden beneath the glittering facade of the Imperial Army's grandeur. As the sun rose on the era of the Great Crusade, the First Legion stood as a vanguard of the Emperor's ambitions, and in part they were entrusted with the solemn duty that would set them apart from the rest. While the younger legions were prepared to embark on the monumental task of galactic conquest, the First would embark on the solitary watch over the Sol system, guarding them against the lurking threats that sought to infiltrate the Emperor's burgeoning realm. For nearly a decade, the First Legion patrolled the dark expanse of space just beyond the reaches of the Sol system, scouring the distant outposts and icy moons of the outer system for any signs of danger. They were the Emperor's Angels of Death, a title officially bestowed upon them exclusively, symbolizing their vigil in the void. Amidst the desolate depths of space, the Legion's specialized units, known as Orders, would emerge in more prominent a fashion, each one now being specifically designed for a particular aspect of warfare, much more tailored to the challenges of the outer reaches of the Sol system than they would have been during their original inception. These warriors had honed their skills throughout countless battles against the unknown, and now were experts, with their expertise encoded into the very fabric of their legion, as both traditions and rituals. Through sacrifice and perseverance, they would uncover the weaknesses in their adversaries, tactically ensuring that they would be best exploited in order to guarantee victory in the face of the most daunting of challenges. Upon their return from the desolate reaches of space, their patrol now ended, the First Legion emerged transformed. Their once grey armor was now cloaked in a profound and ominous black. Their homecoming was devoid of pomp or circumstance, and it was marked only by the silent acknowledgement of the Emperor himself, who recognized their readiness to confront the myriad of tasks lurking across the galaxy. As the legionaries assembled amidst the bustling shipyards of Saturn, their fleets stood as a testament to the valor and the glory of their heritage. Amongst the sleek Saturnine vessels and ancient Martian relics, the First Legion boasted a tithe of Terran ships, relics from a bygone era. These majestic vessels included formidable Gloriana-class battleships and the heavily armored Promethean-class cruisers, which surpassed modern designs in both power and prestige. While other legions received only a scant few of these vessels, the First Legion was granted an entire fleet, as a testament to their unwavering loyalty and dedication to the Emperor's cause, a rather long-running theme amongst the Dark Angels. With these ancient relics at their command, the First Legion stood poised to lead the charge against the looming threats that haunted humanity's survival. The bestowal of the ancient ships upon the First Legion marked not only a mere accolade for deeds past, but a strategic necessity for the trials that would be set upon them. As the Great Crusade ventured beyond the realms of old knights' charts, they would encounter horrors that dwarfed even the greatest conflicts of Terra. The Legion now found themselves in dire need of formidable weaponry, and unlike their brethren, the First Legion was allowed to wield said forbidden arms of destruction with grim efficiency. Gene phage and rad waves, relics of a forgotten age, became their tools of choice, deployed in order to eradicate all abominations deemed too monstrous for conventional warfare. They were now the Emperor's wrath incarnate. Amongst their many conquests, whispers persisted of Belthagene IV, a world ensnared by the horrors of a cosmic contagion, as the third chapter of the First Legion, forged from hosts of stone and iron, embarked on a harrowing campaign against the fortress forged from the very mountains of the world's most formidable peaks, which harbored malevolent entities of hyper-acidic slime. These abominations were a nucleus of infestation which had devoured worlds, reducing millions to mere subsistence for their insatiable appetites. Pictorial remnants hint at the desolation of the Usline cluster, where the 19th Expeditionary Fleet confronted a sentient planet killer, a relic of a forgotten empire unleashed upon the unsuspecting realms, which now would belong to the God Emperor. Grandmaster Hector Thrane's seal upon the records, in essence, shrouded any details other than the pictorial remnants of this confrontation. Such grim battles were amongst countless others, which showed the wars waged in shadows by the First Legion, as they stood paragon in eradicating all existential threats with ruthless efficiency. Yet their various deeds would remain uncelebrated, as their campaigns would constantly be expunged from records in order to safeguard the fragile sanity of those unacquainted with the unrelenting malice of the Void. To outsiders, these early exploits of the First may appear modest compared to their brethren. However, behind the veil of secrecy lie the exemplars of grandeur. Time and time again, the First Legion would prove themselves as the most suitable to be the Imperium's vanguard during the Great Crusade, as they stood as bastions of imperial supremacy, boasting unrivaled numbers, vast armadas, and access to weapons of unparalleled potency, even eclipsing those of their brethren like the Luna Wolves and the Space Wolves, who had already been reunited with their Primarchs. At the helm of these juggernauts stood the Grandmaster of the First Legion, a figure of immense authority within the Imperial Court, whose word was only second to legends such as Malgador the Sigillite and Horus Lupercal. Yet, despite their covert victories, the First Legion would command universal respect and acknowledgement as the preeminent fighting forces for humanity amongst its transhuman warriors. They were the very embodiment of the Emperor's desired martial might. Yet, like the shifting sands of time, their supremacy proved transient, as they too were vulnerable to the corrosive forces of pride and arrogance. In their quest for worthy adversaries, the First Legion would become ensnared by their own hubris, disregarding lesser threats as unworthy of their attention. This would become a fatal flaw, born of overconfidence, which would sow the seeds of the Legion's eventual downfall. As with each adversary they vanquished, they would fortify themselves in an armor of arrogance, unyielding, convinced that they were the pinnacle of martial prowess, and of the glory and perfection of the hexagrammation, which was once a fluid repository of knowledge and strategic competency, led to stagnation as complacency and overconfidence took root. Due to this, recruitment, which was once a steady stream flowing from distant worlds, would dwindle to a mere trickle, as the Legion's insular enclaves on Terra and selected planets honored their traditions of casting aside anyone who was viewed as even slightly inferior. This led to battles which were once opportunities for growth and adaptation becoming validations of entrenched dogma, and with victories becoming celebrated as proof of their inherent superiority, and defeats being dismissed as the failings of lesser beings. As the Great Crusade continued to unfurl, the once open and explorative demeanor of the First Legion morphed into a shroud of constant secrecy and strict, if not rigid, adherence to tradition. Those who were once initially hailed as mentors to their brethren now harbored a growing resentment towards those who they had once guided. While other legions garnered acclaim for seemingly effortless conquests, the first saw their own hard-won victories overshadowed by the laurels of others. Amidst this shifting landscape of power, rivals would emerge. The Ultramarines, led by their Primarch, the illustrious Rebirth boasted greater numbers, while the Imperial Fists under Rogel Dorn wielded formidable relics such as the Phalanx. For a legion steeped in a sense of authority, supremacy, and superiority, finding themselves merely amongst equals struck a devastating blow to their pride. Yet it was the fateful campaign at Canis Balor that delivered the final blow to the faltering confidence of the nigh invincible First. In a seemingly inconsequential star system, the First faced an adversary whose very existence had eluded the records of their orders. Despite their confidence, their relics, and their reliance on tested strategies, these Xenos of Canis Balor unleashed a ferocity and technological prowess that defied all rational explanation. The First, being unaccustomed to setbacks, suffered unbelievably heavy losses, as their pride was now shattered in the wake of the ignominy of defeat. An adversary once presumed conquered by the First emerged anew, shattering their veneer of invincibility, which had cloaked the First Legion for so long. Emboldened by their pride, they continued to launch assault upon assault against the relentless Xenos of Canis Balor. Each was met with fierce resistance, and the rate of mounting casualties was out of control. Grandmaster Hector Thrain, once revered for his flawless leadership, found himself ensnared in a web of hubris, ignoring counsel, all the while being driven by the beliefs in his warriors' unmatched prowess, led Thane to lead a final desperate charge, and though their blades cleaved through the enemy's ranks, their valor was eclipsed by the overwhelming number of foes they now faced. As defeat loomed large, Thrain would make the ultimate sacrifice, remaining behind in order to ensure the retrieval of vital assets. This was a noble act, born out of the belated realization of his own failure. In the aftermath, Canis Balor did lay desolate, its surface scorched by nucleonic fire. Instead of a victorious sentiment, it was a testament to the First Legion's unchecked pride and what a price they had to pay, as the records of the alien menace were quickly sealed and their memory consigned to obscurity, save for the clandestine archives of the Order of the Broken Claws. The loss of this battle and their legendary leader ignited a maelstrom of discontent within the Legion, and amidst the ashes of defeat, power struggles began to occur within the once mighty Dark Angels. This threatened to erode the foundation of its supremacy in a way nothing else had. Amidst the hallowed halls of Greymer, the ancestral stronghold of the First, a tempest began to brew within the Council of Masters. This was due to the loss of their faithful leader, leading them to a realization of their own blindness, as the selection for a new Grand Master became the epicenter of this internal conflict, with each host vying for supremacy and unwilling to concede to another. As the Legion's conquests continued to falter and stagnation loomed, it would only be the intervention of Malcador the Sigillite which would set things straight, as he would shatter this impasse. With words etched into the chamber's lintel, Malcador delivered a clarion call for unity, reminding the council that strength lay not in individual prowess, but in their collective resolve. He decreed that a fortress upheld by many stands tall, Alone, it crumbles, yet without a master, its strength is not. In the wake of Malcador's intervention, the First Legion stood poised to reclaim its tattered mantle of glory and greatness. With its resolve alit anew, the First Legion began to heal. In a monumentous decision that resounded for eons, Malcador's words were taken to heart, as Urayan Vendring, a battle-hardened captain, would emerge as a chosen to become the Legion's master, and he would be entrusted with the Herculean task of restoring the fractured Legion to glory. And he would embark into this role with a fervor unlike any other, recognizing the imperative of the First's full participation in the Emperor's Great Crusade. In order to herald this new chapter in the Legion's history, a select group of remembrancers were granted access to witness the Legion's resurgence under its new leadership. However, destiny would have one final twist in store. Just as the Legion stood on the precipice of renewal, news arrived of a formidable adversary lurking in the fringes of the Great Crusade, the powerful Rangdang, a name that had been whispered across the galaxy with the utmost trepidation, as the First Legion prepared its forces anew in order to face this great threat. The eyes of the Imperium quickly turned to the First, as they would go on to confront this deadly foe upon the northern rim of the galaxy, as the 105th Pioneer Company of the 5th Legion stumbled upon the menacing presence of the Rangdang. It was noted that they were, as of yet, just confined to a singular star system. Even though their advanced technology was formidable, they posed one of the greatest threats to the Imperium's expansion. Responding to this, the newly appointed Grand Master marshaled a vast armada, numbering in the hundreds of ships, as they descended upon Advux Morse, the heart of the Rangdang, and their power base. There they confronted a horrifying spectacle, a colossal artificial war moon erected through the sacrifice of countless lives across the galaxy. In the ensuing clash, the planet bore witness to an apocalypse. The once thriving system had been reduced to desolation, its 6 worlds transformed into lifeless wastelands. The Rangdan Armada, once formidable, lay shattered amidst the debris of space, their slave armies annihilated without mercy. Despite the victory, the cost was staggering. 4 solar months of relentless combat had claimed the lives of 5,000 warriors from the First Legion. Yet, as a banner of the Imperium fluttered over the ruins of the Rangdang War Moon, the galaxy would be reminded of the might of the First Legion, who stood as a bulwark against the ever-encroaching darkness. To be more specific, the numbers comprising the First in this conflict was a staggering 50,000 legionaries, with an additional 100,000 support troops drawn from Imperial army regiments, yet so fierce were their enemies that they struggled to complete the mission. Yet the First was once again successful, as always. With this Imperial victory, the remaining Xenos in the sector scattered, seeking refuge within their dwindling fortresses as the last bastions of their defense crumbled. Yet this retreat was in vain, for the Imperium had tightened its grip within the region, and thus with each passing day, their presence within the system dwindled, until finally it was fully cleansed of their taint. In the aftermath of their triumph, the Grand Master of the First Legion hungered for further accolades and greater victories to adorn his Legion's banners. Amidst the whispers of victory and glory, it was the First Legion who would embark most boldly on the relentless pursuit of conquest, and each victory was sought with an increasing fervor that bordered on the reckless. Even as their laurels grew, the distant eyes of Terra's Divisio Militaris watched with an air of expectation, deeming the Legion's exploits as nothing beyond the ordinary. Undeterred by the shadow of this grand expectation, the Grand Master of the First set his sights on the formidable bastion of Carcassan, a fortress that had defied the legendary prowess of Reboot Guilliman and his elite Ultramarines for nearly a solar month. The Lord of Ultramar, known for his patience and strategic acumen, had laid meticulous plans to besiege this legendary fortress, preferring a more methodical approach in order to avoid casualties. Yet when the first arrived on scene, their ambitions were undaunted by the caution or counsel set about by Rebirth. Instead of aligning with his prudent strategies, they saw an opportunity to test their mettle against the renowned Primarch himself. Forming a resolute front before the towering gates of the fortress, the warriors of the First Legion charged forward, driven by a hunger to humble a legend. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the battlefield would be cast in an eerie light, as the initial assault was met with a thunderous barrage of rampart cannons, claiming hundreds of lives instantly. Yet undeterred by the ferocity of the defenders, the black-armored first pressed on, their determination unyielding, sacrificing themselves in order to breach the formidable gates, in a furious manner reminiscent of the World Eaters. Meanwhile, the Ultramarines, under the prudent leadership of Rebirth, advanced cautiously and methodically, securing objectives with minimal loss. However, the vanguard of the First Legion surged ahead, their sights set on the central plaza, which was the veritable heart of the citadel. Yet as victory seemed within their grasp, treachery lurked within the shadows, and in a desperate bid in order to thwart invaders, the planet's overlords unleashed a hidden atomic mine beneath the keep, and in a blinding flash of light which deafened all those near, the second Grandmaster of the First Legion, along with his loyal cadre from the host of death, were all swallowed by the earth. Their triumph turned into a tragedy, and amidst the smoldering ruins and the fallen heroes of the Legion, victory would stand bittersweet. This was a price paid in blood and valor, which only seemed to amplify the triumph they had wrestled from the jaws of defeat. Yet, as the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded, the Lord of Ultramar, stoic and unyielding, offered no solace for the victorious warriors. His gaze, cold like steel, pierced through the ranks of the battered legion, his words cutting deeper than any sword. "Vain glory is a poor strategist," he would go on to say, "for he renders triumph a bitter trophy and an empty prize. Today you have proven your strength, but not your wisdom." Within those solemn words lay a profound lesson, a reminder that victory was not measured on conquest alone, but in the wisdom to discern when to wield a sword and when to sheath it. The Legion would go on to nurse their wounds once again, as they mourned their fallen. This led them to stand on a crossroads, as their path forward was uncertain. In the aftermath of the Grandmaster's passing, a chilling specter emerged once again, as the warriors of the First Legion became embittered, viewing the planet as a reminder of the fractured brotherhood with the Ultramarines, since they were no longer even viewed as revered mentors, but relegated to equals, if not lessers, as many within the Legion viewed the words of Guilliman as an insult of the harshest order. However, despite all this, the First Legion would continue to march forward, driven by the desire to reclaim their honor once again, and prove their valor in the face of adversity. Once again, the Council Masters would seize control of the mighty First Legion, dispersing its forces in the vast expanse of the cosmos, in a pursuit for vindication through the crucible of conflict. Each segment within the Legion would be driven by an unrelenting desire to prove their mettle, not just against themselves, but against all other Space Marine legions, heedless of the sacrifices demanded by this relentless pursuit. Eventually, in a daring raid, cloaked in darkness, the 9th and 4th segments of the Legion stormed the citadels of Melank, and they were even able to wrestle control away from Fara'al in a night of relentless carnage. Yet despite achieving victory once again, the cost was staggering, as a 10th of their own was sacrificed in this relentless pursuit of triumph. Yet they were spurred on by the looming threat of the Luna Wolves elsewhere within this cluster. Meanwhile, amidst the vast deserts of Varsigon, a valiant force comprised of 1,000 initiates from the hosts of iron faced off against a horde of savage orcoid hulks, which outnumbered them threefold. Yet despite the odds being stacked against them, these warriors of the First fought with unyielding determination and eventually claimed victory once more at a harrowing cost. Yet despite the relentless campaigns and all the blood spilled in the name of honor, the First Legion found themselves no closer to reclaiming their illustrious glory, as the path towards redemption was still fraught with ever-mounting challenges and sacrifices. But as the galaxy continued to unfold within the wake of these conflicts, the legions of Astartes would each evolve into a distinct force, honing their tactics, strategies, and even identities in the crucible of this galactic conflict. Principles laid down by the Dark Angels on Terra became less and less prevalent. It would be during this era that in the heart of Ultramar, its lord, Reboot Guilliman, and the Ultramarines would craft a thesis on war going forward, which would in essence replace in almost totality the thesis and stratagems originating from the First Legion's early existence. But this was no slight. It was a testament to the ceaseless quest for improvement, which sight of had been lost by the First Legion. The glorious era of the First Legion's supremacy seemed to have its final death nail placed, as they had once been a bastion of the burgeoning Imperium, who had now faded into all but obscurity, their veiled secrecy being more of a detriment than a boon, as their glorious past now existed only in the memories of elder warriors and the clandestine records of the Imperial archives. It was a bitter irony that their most illustrious achievements remained entwined with their honor and held captive by the shadows of forgotten battles. Yet as the Great Crusade surged forward, due to the Emperor's relentless campaigns to unite the galaxy, the First Legion found themselves at a pivotal juncture in their saga. As their sister legions flourished and grew in strength, it seems the Angels of Death would endure another fate. Their power dissipated in sacrificial endeavors and harrowing campaigns. As their limits were tested, these wars extracted a heavy toll and continued to deplete the ranks and war machines beyond prudence. However, this would also temper the legionaries into formidable warriors, as they would become stoic harbingers of death in the eyes of their allies, ever seeking worthy adversaries to test their mettle against. Warriors who refused to retreat even in the face of certain doom, as leadership would now remain divided amongst the council masters. Such a path seemed destined to lead the Legion to their downfall. Their pride had become a double-edged sword. Yet once more, fate seemed to intervene when the scouting fleet of the White Scars under Jagadai Khan's command stumbled across a world shrouded in mystery. This was Caliban, and amidst the shadowed forests of Caliban, the Emperor would unveil the First Legion's salvation, Lionel Johnson. Once their Primarch was found, things began to quickly change for the First Legion. However, to understand these changes, we have to look at the origins of the Primarch, Lionel Johnson. Before the dawn of the Great War, the primordial pod carrying the infant Primarch would mysteriously materialize through the turbulent currents of the warp, and as it sailed through the currents of the warp, it would eventually careen as it descended towards the heart of Caliban. This was a savage death world nestled within Segmentum Obscurus. Caliban's rugged terrain was cloaked in vast expanses of primeval forests, which were teeming with grotesque monstrosities which had been further malformed by the insidious influences of chaos, a legacy of their unfortunate location so near the Eye of Terror's malevolent aura. Amidst the unforgiving wilderness, the young Lionel Johnson found himself thrust into a battle of survival, navigating the treacherous landscape as a solitary figure far removed from the trappings and luxuries of civilization. As shadowed within the untamed wildernesses of Caliban, the Primarch of the First Legion would forge his path as a lone warrior, fighting against the ever-encroaching darkness, as tales of sighting him appeared all over Caliban, as mere whispers in the winds and secrets seen in the monster-filled forests of Caliban. And here, nestled between the sprawling forests of Caliban, lay realms steeped in both legend and mystery, where valiant knightly orders of warrior aristocrats flourished, bound by duty to safeguard their people and the towering fortress monasteries that served as bastions against the ever-encroaching horrors of Caliban's wilderness. These noble orders formed the center of Caliban's tumultuous history, upholding ancient traditions and wielding the remnants of bygone technology salvaged from the ruins of a forgotten era. Amongst these relics were primitive bolt pistols and rudimentary suits of power armor, reminiscent of the formidable armor which would be adopted by the Adeptus Astartes. These armors were passed down through generations as artifacts which bestowed upon their wielders the aura of martial prowess and ancestral honor. Yet despite the veneer of technological sophistication, Caliban itself remained rooted in a pre-industrial epoch, where warriors thundered into battle astride mighty steeds, as their thunderous hooves echoed throughout the verdant expanse. Chief amongst these knightly orders stood the creatively named the Order, which was a bastion of both commoners and nobles alike, united in a singular purpose, in order to succeed by transcending the rigid boundaries of Calibanite society, while others would draw their ranks exclusively from Caliban's noble elite. The Order embraced individuals of all walks of life, forging friendships and fellowships bound by courage and camaraderie. Somewhere around a century and a half would pass before the veil of time would part, revealing the long-lost Primarch, Lionel Johnson, deep within the heart of Caliban's ancient forests. Here, amidst the towering foliage, roamed beasts of legend, remnants of a forgotten era, when chimeric monstrosities stalked the land, hungering for blood and conquest. Deep within this untamed wilderness, where echoes of civilization faded into darkness, the young lion would remain a silent enigma, his origins obscured by the veil of time, as tales whispered by knightly orders spoke of a youth forged in solitude, his form untouched by the passage of years, as generations passed and the same being was witnessed time and time again. This was a testament to the divine essence imbued by the Emperor's hand. Now, unfortunately, the exact duration of the lion's solitary vigil remains a matter mostly of conjecture and lost to the sands of time, while the knights who discovered him ventured to estimate his age based on mortal standards. The truth seems to elude comprehension, for the Primarchs, being born of the Emperor's will, defy the laws of mortal existence and development. As the lion walked his solitary path within Caliban's wilderness, his survival hinged on being able to develop both cunning and skill. This deadly environment honed his instincts on a razor's edge, as he embraced the art of combat, not as a brute force, but as a delicate dance of strategy and precision. Each of his encounters became a deadly game of wits, where victory meant life and defeat spelled certain doom. With nothing but his bare hands and an iron resolve, the lion faced the horrors of Caliban's depths, his determination becoming an unyielding force, an unbeatable strength amidst the darkness. Yet he was no mindless berserker driven by primal rage, but a calculating hunter guided by logic and reason. When the knights of Caliban stumbled upon this mysterious youth, they beheld a being so formidable that some deemed him no different than the savage beasts which roamed the depths. Yet it was the fateful judgment of a lone individual named Luther that would alter the course of the lion's destiny, ushering him from the realm of beasts into the world of men. It was Luther, a stalwart defender of the realm, who discovered him and bestowed upon him the moniker Lionel Johnson, signifying his prowess and the bond with the forests itself. Under Luther's tutelage, the lion embraced the noble traditions of the order, learning to wield justice with a tempered hand and to channel his strength for the greater good. Forged in this crucible, the lion found his purpose beyond mere survival, but as a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching forest's shadows. As Caliban was constantly gripped by the relentless onslaught of the great beasts which caused humanity on the planet to stand on the brink of oblivion. Even though the valiant efforts of the Order served as a bulwark against the ever-encroaching darkness, they could only delay the inevitable as their numbers were dwindling in the face of insurmountable odds. Now that the Lion had been transported from the wilderness to the bastion of Alderbrook, he assimilated the customs and tactical acumen along with the use of the intricate Calibanite weaponry with unparalleled swiftness that left even his mentor Luther astonished. As he ascended through the ranks of the Order alongside Luther himself, emerging as formidable warriors, achieving the pinnacle of the Order's hierarchy. Propelled by the Lion's unwavering vision, the Order would embark on a crusade against the monstrous scourge that plagued Caliban's inhabitants. His call to arms echoed through the Order and beyond, igniting a fervor of liberation that could only come from a Primarch. However, his path to victory was arduous, spanning a solar decade of relentless warfare against unyielding beasts lurking within the forest steppes. And in this unending battle, Lionel Johnson revealed not only his prowess as a warrior and a tactician, but his innate ability to inspire those around him. Each triumph against the beasts seemed to only bolster the ranks of the Order, regardless if they lost warriors, constantly drawing forth new recruits who dared dream of a future beyond mere survival at the edge of existence. Even though he was known for his affinity for solitude, Lionel Johnson's actions would propel him to the forefront of Caliban's transformative crusade. His presence on the battlefield, coupled with an unwavering resolve to act decisively, would define his leadership. In a bold departure from tradition, Lionel Johnson dismantled the age-old barriers restricting ascension to the upper ranks of the Order, extending a call to arms beyond the realms of nobility, and even beyond his own realms. This audacious move swelled the Order's ranks, albeit at the expense of dissent amongst the adherents to the traditional values of the Order. Those knightly orders resistant to join Lionel Johnson's movement faced swift and decisive retribution. The Knights of Lupus, entrenched in their northern fortress and wary of the upheaval promised by the demise of the great beasts, met their ends at Lionel Johnson's hand, their dissent silenced by the echoes of battle. In a mere decade, the Order burgeoned, empowering them to plunge deeper and deeper into the heart of Caliban's ancient woodlands. Guided by the Lion and Luther, they embarked on a relentless crusade which purged its ancestral lands of all manner of beast. The campaign was a protracted affair, marked by bloodshed and sacrifice. For every monstrous nest razed to the ground, scores of brave and fine warriors fell. All the while, the battle wore many to the bone. Yet amidst this carnage, the Lion's resolve remained resolute. To him, mercy and rest was a luxury war would ill afford. Only through the utter annihilation of their enemy could their centuries-old torment come to an end. Lionel Johnson's tactics were marked as equal parts cunning and ruthless. Ambushes while lurking in the shadow, poisoning tainted beasts' watering holes, and swaths of forest engulfed in infernal flames, all designed to drive the creatures into desperation. His warriors, in awe and trepidation, spoke of his exploits with a mixture of reverence and dread, for the Lion's prowess was only matched by the terror he instilled in his quarry, an apex predator of this deadly world. As his influence grew, so would the trepidation amongst the remaining elite, because after the Knights of Lupus were eliminated, many balked at his unyielding methods and feared the seismic shifts in tradition and leadership he had heralded. Others harbored more sinister ambitions, coveting the power the Lion now wielded. In response to this dissent, the Lion would once again mete out swift justice. Traitors to Caliban's cause found themselves crushed beneath the weight of their own rebellion. Their fortresses, once symbols of defiance and strength, would be made to lay in ruins as grim graveyards and reminders of the consequences of defiance. As the crusade against the great beasts reached its conclusion, with both Lionel Johnson and Luther drained by the relentless tolls of battle, it was a Lion who would emerge as the preeminent figure of the world. who would be bestowed with the title of Grand Master of the Order and adorned with the accolades of victory. And as Lion accepted these honors with his characteristic stoicism, people would watch him in awe, as the trappings of human society paled in comparison to the trials he had endured amidst Caliban's wilds. Unbeknownst to the Lion, his ascent had not gone unnoticed by Luther, whose own transformation remained shrouded in the shadows of their shared past. Once comrades, now rivals, the bond between Luther and the Lion was irrevocably altered by the tide of fate. With each triumph, the Primarch seemed to ascend to greater and greater heights still, his glory casting a shadow over his once equal mentor and brother in all but blood. Yet blinded by his own success, the Lion failed to perceive festering seeds of envy which sprouted within Luther's heart, as he ignored the flames of jealousy kindled by his own achievements, as the Primarch continuously unknowingly wounded his brother, leaving behind a rift which would deepen in time. In a different era, this wound might have mended itself amidst the tranquility of Caliban's newfound peace. However, destiny seemed to have other plans. Descending from the celestial realms came the Emperor. It was on 846 M30 that the Emperor of Mankind, accompanied by a select cadre of 500 Astartes, hailing from the First Legion, would descend upon Caliban, in response to the Primarch's psychic presence. From the instant of the Emperor's arrival, the connection resonated between him and Lionel Johnson, hinting at a destiny entwined in the fate of the galaxy. Recognizing the bond forged between them, Lionel Johnson would pledge his unwavering allegiance to the Master of Mankind. In reciprocity, the Emperor bestowed upon the Lion the mantle of leadership over the newly reborn First Legion, who had been crafted from the Lion's own genetic blueprint. The Emperor's grand vision in the aftermath of Old Knight's demise had manifested in the Great Crusade, a monumental endeavor aimed at reunifying humanity's scattered colonies, reasserting its dominance over the stars. The Space Marine legions would be the instruments of the Emperor's will, spearheading his noble quest, eradicating all the Xenos oppressors from the galaxy, which would stand in the way of humanity's ascendancy. And the Primarchs, like Lionel Johnson, would lead these great men in war. Those who had come with the Emperor were veterans hailing from the renowned host of death. These warriors bore the distinct mantle of the First Legion, all clad in somber hues of jet black power armor, adorned with mortuary symbols. This was an ominous sight for all those in Caliban, hearkening back to their fabled lore. As the Master of Mankind set foot within the Order's main fortress, those who viewed him and his son felt as if they were spectators in the annals of legend, as the towering warriors of the First Legion bowed in reverence and homage to the figure of Lionel Johnson, the valiant Knight of Caliban and Grand Master of the Order. In a moment that would echo throughout history, the Legion found itself faced with their progenitor, and in a gesture of profound sacrifice, Lionel Johnson sought to gauge the prowess and loyalty of his newfound sons by engaging in the trial of combat with the captain of the company, who had been clad in the formidable cataphracti pattern Terminator armor. The Legion's champion would confront the Primarch, wielding a blade wreathed in crackling energy against the Lion's own rugged steel blade. As they clashed, the only thing providing any sort of edge for the captain was his weapon's pulsating power field. However, when the tumult of combat ended, it was the Primarch who emerged victorious, his opponent wounded and defeated, and this would form a bond of mutual respect between the Lion and his sons, and thus the Primarch would bestow the Astartes with the name that would ring throughout the ages, the Dark Angels, a name derived from Caliban's own historic traditions. As news of the Lion's return reached the governing council of masters in the distant Greymoor, the heart of the First Legion, a tumult of conflicting emotions surged throughout their ranks. The revelation of their Primarch's existence stirred a maelstrom of shame and pride, tearing the very fabric of their allegiance asunder. While none dared question the Emperor's decree that Lionel Johnson was their true lord, the council found themselves ensnared in a web of conflicting sentiments. Some amongst them were haunted by remorse and confronted by the stark reality of their legion's tarnished honor and the formidable burden their Primarch would inherit. Others were fueled by a fervent desire to redeem themselves and their legion's standing, yearning to embark on a crusade, seeking to present their new master with a glorious victory in his name. As across the vast expanse of the galaxy, the disparate units of the First Legion mirrored the Council's divided stance, some inspired by the prospect of restoring honor, while others plunged headlong into battle, their fervor reignited with the promise of redemption. Conversely, others sought to disengage from their ongoing campaigns, yearning to make a pilgrimage to their Primarch, who at the moment was back on Terra, being trained and introduced to the complexities that the Master of Mankind would bestow upon his shoulders. There, amidst the hallowed halls of the Imperial Palace, the Primarch would be initiated into the intricate tapestry of war that awaited him. His role in shaping the destiny of the Imperium and humanity as a whole was now unveiled before his very eyes. Following the Emperor's arrival and the Lion's departure, Space Marines of the First Legion initiated a series of rigorous trials and competitions amongst the aspirants drawn from the Order and other knightly organizations within Caliban. These challenges were both physical and psychological, as they served as a litmus test for the candidates' martial prowess and character, in order to separate the wheat and the chaff, as whispers were permeated throughout the halls of Caliban, hinting at the coveted opportunity to join the ranks of the Astartes and ascend from mere humans to a higher state. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper, more clandestine purpose lay within these trials. Beyond a mere selection, it also served to scrutinize the genetic purity of Caliban's human population. For the First Legion, the stakes were twofold: identifying the most worthy candidates for the transformation into superhuman warriors, and assessing the suitability of Caliban as fertile grounds for further recruitment endeavors, all the while ascertaining if their hands would be forced in destroying their Primarch's adopted homeworld. In the wake of the Emperor's arrival and the subsequent integration of Caliban into the Imperium, a significant transformation swept across the world. While the knightly orders of Caliban had long reveled in their distinct identities, often resorting to martial conflict in order to settle disputes, the Space Marine legions stood as almost uniform bastions of unity and purpose. Led by the Lions, the Dark Angel's monumental decision was made: the dissolution of the individual knightly orders and their assimilation into the ranks of the Legion. This profound restructuring aimed to forge a singular unifying force, an identity that would serve the Emperor and the Imperium. However, such a monumentous undertaking encountered no shortage of resistance. Not all within the knightly orders were willing to relinquish their autonomy and pride. Despite the Lions' persuasive rhetoric, dissenting voices would persist, clinging to their traditions and independence in the face of change. Yet amidst the discord, the promise of glory and honor under the banner of the Emperor's cause did sway many to acquiesce to unification. As the Imperial army descended upon Caliban's surface, and dissent rippled throughout its populace, the trials of the First Legion officially commenced, as the majority of Caliban's inhabitants remained poised to join the ranks of the Imperial army, be they Astartes or otherwise. In a remarkably brief span of time, Caliban underwent a metamorphosis unlike any seen before. Once a world of untamed wilderness and ancient forests, it swiftly evolved into a hub of mortal industry. The tranquil echoes of nature were replaced by the relentless clang of factories and hammers, along with the resolute march of soldiers preparing for the crucible of interstellar conflict. The arrival of the Emperors on Caliban brought with them enormous earth-moving machines that methodically cleared dozens of kilometers of forests every single day, leaving behind flat, lifeless soil ready for the construction and cultivation of human industry. This cleared land soon hosted mines, refineries, and manufactura, all designed to best exploit Caliban's abundant resources and convert them into vital war material for the Emperor's Grand Crusade. As industrial sites sprawled across the world, new cities would emerge to support them. These urban centers grew both upwards and outwards, with each passing Terra near. Traditional villages and towns surrounding these fortress monasteries would be emptied, as their citizens were relocated better to serve the Imperium, their lives irrevocably changed by the relentless march of progress. And amidst this transition, a significant milestone would be reached. The individuals who had proven themselves would be finally deemed ready to become Astartes. The first aspirants of Caliban would be officially inducted into the First Legion, marking the culmination of Caliban's integration into the Imperium and the solidification of its role in the Emperor's vast interstellar war machine. Word would eventually arrive from Luther that the Astartes had completed their final selection for advanced training and genetic enhancements to join their ranks. As over the next several standard years, through the application of imperial science and the marvels of gene seed, these chosen aspirants were transformed into battle brothers of the newly christened Dark Angels. Luther himself had also been selected to join, like many of the Order's ranks. However, like a significant portion of the initial initiates taken from the Order and other Calibanite knightly orders, he was too old to benefit from the traditional full implantation of gene seed. In its stead, Luther and his peers underwent an extensive series of genetic, surgical, and biomechanical enhancement procedures, which greatly mirrored that of the Thunder Warriors. These modifications significantly increased their strength, stamina, and reflexes to superhuman levels, similar to that of the Astartes, and while they became taller, stronger, and quicker than any ordinary man, they would never achieve the full status of true Astartes. This delineation marked a pivotal moment within the integration of Caliban into the Imperium, as the now transformed aspirants of the Dark Angels symbolized a full blending of Caliban's martial tradition with the advanced capabilities of the Imperium, setting the stage for their future contributions. And the changes to Caliban's knightly orders was not just in physical appearance, but the very fabric of their relationships, as Luther and others were now surrounded by those who had once been their squires and junior knights, which had ascended to stations far above themselves, and as the old order was now amongst warriors who had become far more powerful than they could ever hope to be. Yet Luther would continue to serve as a lion's second within the Legion, a position which he had earned through merit and unwavering commitment to the imperial ideal, as his dedication was undeniable and his contributions significant beyond measure. Despite his achievements, Luther would never be able to shake the inner conviction that he was viewed as lesser because he was not a true Astartes. This internal struggle colored his interactions and added a further layer of complexity to his leadership, as the knowledge that he would never reach the same heights of power as his genetically enhanced comrades gnawed at him. This sense of inadequacy, though often hidden behind a veneer of steadfast loyalty and compliance, was a constant undercurrent in Luther's psyche, influencing his actions and decisions. And as Caliban integrated even further into the Imperium, these tensions would continue to simmer beneath the surface, hinting at the challenges and futures which lay ahead, seeing as he was not the only one who felt this way about the change in status. As the remarkable transformation of the Dark Angels was not just a physical metamorphosis, but a profound reshaping of loyalties, hierarchies, and personal identities. And in this crucible of change, conflict would be sown, as individuals such as Luther, amongst others, struggled to reconcile their past glories with the stark reality of their present and future limitations. Eventually, Lionel Johnson and his identity would lead to him being often regarded by his brother Primarchs as a dour and morose individual, a figure of somber determination, as his demeanor was marked by moods and aversions to the counsel of others, all stemming from his stark and simple worldview. His time on Terra did teach him the harsh truth that the war waged on Caliban's monster-hunted forest was merely a prelude, a children's game, compared to the greater conflict ahead. As the galaxy teemed with monsters and his purpose was clear, he was set to to destroy them. Unlike Sanguinius, who embraced the chivalric ideals, or Mortarion, who harbored arbitrary hatreds, or even Fulgrim, who was obsessed with beauty and perfection, Lionel Johnson dismissed such passions and distractions. To him, they obfuscated his true goal, the annihilation of mankind's enemies. His single-minded focus on his objective rendered him both more and less than his brothers. As the first Primarch created by the Emperor, he embodied a primal force of destruction. His humanity was greatly eclipsed by his relentless drive. The Lion's approach was rooted in his experiences in Caliban, where survival depended on ruthlessness and clarity of purpose. As his return to Terra did not change his perspectives, rather, they intensified his resolve, as he saw the universe as more of an upscaled battleground, where the only measure of success was the eradication of the threats to the Imperium. This unyielding stance made him a formidable leader, yet it also isolated him as his brothers struggled to understand and cope with his relentless nature. And in the grand tapestry of the Great Crusade, Lionel Johnson would forge himself as a singular figure, a destroyer forged by necessity and honed by purpose, as he could stand against any of his kin, match blades with Fulgrim, and even stalemate the great strategist Rebirth Guilliman. And while others might surpass him in specific skills, none equaled him in the grander scope of battle. His will was marked by bloody-minded determination, as he was unmatched. His talents and the resolute confidence in himself, which some might call arrogance, won him few friends, but his prowess ensured he was placed at the head of his legion far faster than any other Primarch recovered before him. The legion he inherited, however, was in desperate need of its Primarch and a new beginning. Scattered and fractured, the First Legion remained a powerful fighting force, but one whose purpose had become obscured in the long years of the Great Crusade before the coming of the Primarch. They had been mentors, guides to the younger legions, but by now their students had long since found their own wisdom. Now, with the Lion's return, he would grant them a new purpose, one aligned with methods and visions that he viewed and held for the Emperor's Great Crusade. The Lion's ascension marked a turning point for the First Legion, and brought new clarity of vision and a ruthless efficiency they had not known for a long time. No longer were they merely a guide, but they would lead, striking fear into the very cores of the Emperor's enemies. Under the Lion's command, the Legion was transformed into a singular entity, embodying his relentless drive and unwavering focus. Under his leadership, which was characterized by strategic brilliance and unyielding resolve, a new standard for the Legion would be set. His ability to inspire and drive his warriors to new heights of discipline and effectiveness solidified his place at the forefront of the Great Crusade, as the Dark Angels became a symbol of the Emperor's might once again, and a testament to the indomitable will and perseverance of their Primarch. And one of the first acts that the Primarch achieved was the merging of teachings between Caliban's techno-feudal aristocracy and those of the First Legion's hexagrammation. This fusion created a refined and formidable synthesis of Terra and Caliban, laying the foundations for the new era of excellence, all the while gathering the scattered fragments of his legion. The initial generation of recruits were selected from worthy knights of Caliban and had been undergoing the rigorous process of gene implantation and hypnagogic indoctrination, along with live fire training. And with these fresh initiates at his command, Lionel Johnson was set for his own campaign. Accompanying him were the original 500 warriors who had first arrived on Caliban, as well as various battle groups that had been wrought from Caliban's own populace, who had pledged their allegiance to the now ascended Primarch. This formidable force was bolstered by auxilia companies raised to serve the Imperial army, and a small retinue of Mechanicum Magi from the Forge World Zana II, who were all eager to court favor with the new Primarch. In total, this army numbered a full 20,000 warriors, approximately a third of the Legion. Each soldier was marked by the promise of a new beginning, all bearing the emblem of the winged sword of Lionel Johnson's Dark Angels, symbolizing their allegiance to the future rather than the grim remnants of their past. Under his guidance, the Dark Angels became more than mere warriors. They became a relentless force which would unify the galaxy under his father's vision. Lionel Johnson led his now formidable host to reunite with the scattered companies of his Gene sons, scattered across the vast expanse of the Great Crusade. Finding these warriors amidst the galaxy-spanning war involving 10 billion soldiers was no small feat. It was made possible only by the Lion's strategic genius and the technological prowess of the tech adepts from Zana II, who effectively analyzed the databanks of the Divisio Militaris to pinpoint the companies of the First Legion and where they were engaged. For any other legion, the arrival of a newly discovered Primarch might have been a cause for grand celebrations and ostentatious praise. However, the grim and resolute First Legion responded rather differently. News of the Lion's approach inspired warriors to intensify their efforts further still. Not only had he been rediscovered, but his eye might be directly upon them, so they began to fight with greater and greater ferocity, as they intended to present their father with blood-soaked laurels upon his arrival to any of their battlefields. The Lion's presence had a profound impact on his warriors, as his reputation as a strategic mastermind and an unyielding leader would precede him, instilling a renewed sense of pride within the Dark Angels. The Legion, once scattered and fragmented, began to coalesce and unite under the force of his leadership. The process of reunification was not merely a logistical endeavor, but a reinvigoration of spirit, as the original 500 who had arrived first on Caliban had already pledged their allegiance and gained distinction amongst their ranks, along with the fresh recruits from Caliban who were still undergoing either transformation or training, would represent the new future for these vaunted warriors. Lionel Johnson's vision extended far beyond merely military might, as he sought to integrate many of the aspects of Caliban's knightly traditions within the advanced doctrines of the First Legion's combat practices. As each battle-worn company greeted their new master with stoic reserve, they displayed a silent courtesy, offering a brief but solemn vow of allegiance. The Primarch, Lionel Johnson, would go on to test each of these companies in battle before they joined his growing entourage officially. And true to his nature, the Lion demonstrated his worth through actions and skill, and not through vague words or promises. Those who harbored doubts had the opportunity to match their blade against him in honest combat. After such trials, none within the Legion could question his right to lead. However, his arrival was not without controversy, as some within the Legion harbored misgivings about the sudden alterations to their century-long practices and the shift in authority they represented. Since the Lion's approach was stark and uncompromising, it would reflect his view upon his Legion. They would accept or they would accept. And this perspective was at odds with the more nuanced practices and approaches of some of his brothers, but it would resonate with the core identity of the Dark Angels, as his style of leadership was characterized by relentless focus and the primary goal being accomplished by destroying all enemies within the battlefield. The Lion saw his Legion rally behind him, as his talents in strategy and combat, coupled with his resolute confidence, solidified his position within the Great Crusade, as within a few rather short standard years, the Lion had reunited with nearly 100,000 warriors of his Legion, and he had led them to the ancient stronghold of the First Legion on Greymoor, as the council masters who had yet to meet him awaited the conclave. Gathered amidst the many glories of the First Legion and their long storied history, the chamber had been filled with the amassment of wisdom distilled from countless battles, and a litany of dusty trophies of past victories, who would serve as silent witnesses to this monumentous gathering. In this hallowed setting, the Lion set about making his Legion whole once again. In order to affirm his leadership, he faced the ceremonial champion of the Council Masters in the Ring of Honor. His opponent was Caligate, the master of the Host of Fire. In their duel, which lasted an hour, something commendable for any Space Marine, would lead to legends being formed. With this final trial completed, the Primarch accepted the title of Grand Master of the 1st Legion and the leader of the 6 wings of the Hexagrammation, along with the title of High Preceptor of the Orders Militant, as he became the first warrior to consolidate the leadership of an entire legion under his singular banner through combat. The Lion's leadership brought a new surge of purpose to the Dark Angels, as they had now essentially been given a rebirth, a renaissance if you will. To the assembled warriors of the Dark Angels Legion, whose oaths had been sworn through blood and sacrifice, the new Primarch made a solemn pledge. This oath would now be immortalized in the books of the Council of Masters, and it would go as follows. We are the angels of darkness. For us there is no peace, no end but war and death. We shall not walk in the golden halls of mankind's future, but stand resolute in the shadows beyond. While we yet draw breath, the Imperium will not fall, and we will not know defeat. I pledge every warrior, every drop of blood in this legion, in the name of victory, no matter the cost. This vow sealed a pact between the Primarch and his legion, uniting them under a shared destiny. As the Dark Angels, now bearing the weight of this oath, embraced their role as a bulwark against the Imperium's enemies. Under the Lion's leadership, they would become an unstoppable force, or die trying, driven by the relentless pursuit of victory, as the echoes of this oath would reverberate all the way to the 41st millennium. In the wake of the Lion's solemn oath to his legion, a transformative reorganization would sweep throughout the ranks of the 1st Legion, now reborn as the Dark Angels officially. The Primarch would go on to appoint new leaders to oversee each of the wings, which he had meticulously crafted from the remnants of the Legion's former hosts. Drawing inspiration from the noble traditions of Caliban's knightly orders, he formalized the Dark Angels into a diverse series of informal orders, infusing the Legion with the structured hierarchy reminiscent of his homeworld. As the first wave of fresh recruits from Caliban, including the seasoned warriors who had become half Astartes, stood ready to join the ranks and march on to war, Lionel Johnson seamlessly integrated them into the new framework, as merit became the sole criteria for assignments of command and leadership, superseding any considerations of origin or seniority. Amongst the Primarch's inner circle emerged several of his trusted commanders from the Order. Their bonds had been forged through shared trials and tribulation, yet despite the rigorous standards set by the Lion, a hint of discontent seemed to linger amongst some of the long-serving veterans, as authority shifted to those relatively newer entrants into the Legion. The Grand Legion that once had stood on Greymoor yielded to the winds of time and change, as their large bastion was replaced by a more modest fortress designed in particular to guard the burgeoning industrial complexes on the planet of Caliban. While Caliban would retain its status as the bastion of the Legion, their true center of power would lay in the sanctum of the Primarch aboard his flagship, the venerable Gloriana-class battleship known as the Invincible Reason. Here, amidst the whispers of ancient corridors and the hum of technological marvels, Lionel Johnson plotted the course of his Legion, charting a path towards the fulfillment of his sacred oath towards his father and the Imperium. As the Primarch stood aboard his flagship, it seemed that a resurgence of the Legion under the Lion was guaranteed, since he had breathed a new life into the Dark Angels, and had dispelled any lingering shadows of doubt that had clouded their ranks, shredding the burdens of the past and its former glories, as they would all embrace the purity of their Primarch's vision, rejuvenated by the promise of a unified purpose. Yet amidst the fervor of renewal, it seemed that there was still some trepidation within the veterans, in particular those who did not embrace the fresh blood from their Calibanite brothers. Unfazed by the descent, Lionel Johnson met resistance with stoicism, choosing to lead by example on the battlefield rather than engaging in debate, entrusting the Legion into the capable hands of masters and knight commanders. He would dispatch Dark Angels on assignments and duties while embarking on separate missions of his own, leading from the front rather than from the back lines. Eventually, the Lion would be guided by a cryptic message received by Caliban's astropathic choir, leading the Primarch to set course for the distant world of Cascam. There, amidst the crumbling remains of a shattered world fortress, the Ultramarines and their garrisons fought a valiant struggle against insurrection, as their steadfast resistance defied the besiegers for a solid 8 solar months. Now, with the Lion's arrival, it seemed there was a glimmer of hope for the Imperial loyalists who seemed to face insurmountable odds. As the fate of Karshkam hung in the balance, the conflict would quickly reach its zenith. The rebels would resort to desperate measures, unearthing ancient vaults buried within the planet's surface, where a biogenic plague had been stored. Said plague would quickly be unleashed upon its populace, twisting them into grotesque, inhuman, bloodthirsty monstrosities, devoid of reason save for their insatiable hunger for carnage. The mutated horrors born from the virulent plague descended upon the warriors of the Ultramarines Legion with a savagery that even battle-hardened Astartes found challenging. With much of the Great Crusade's might focused elsewhere in the eastern reaches of the galaxy, relief seemed unlikely for the Ultramarines. Few would dare even entertain the notion of aid coming from the Dark Angels. Yet, as the invincible reason had materialized from the warp, its drop pods prepared for imminent deployment, it would be noted that Praetor Atron, commander of the embattled Ultramarines garrison, would momentarily abandon his own stoicism as he was unable to contain the physical reaction of elation at the unexpected arrival of reinforcements from the First. And amidst this chaos, the Lion himself emerged as a vanguard of the relief forces, leading a formidable contingent of 1,000 Deathwing veterans clad in ebony armor, which would carve through the horde of flesh-craving monstrosities who had threatened the Ultramarines' survival. As the air crackled with a discharge of superheated plasma, they would purge the fortress of all its assailants. Following closely behind the Dark Angels were 10,000 other transhuman warriors, their blades glinting in the dim light as they descended upon the enemy with relentless fury, leading the foes to cower, as swift and merciless annihilation came at the hands of the First Legion. As the Ultramarines ventured forth from their defenses to meet their saviors amidst the carnage, apprehension tinged their anticipation, as they half expected demands for retribution and territorial concessions. This was due to their long history with the First Legion. However, it seemed that the Lion, unlike many Primarchs, harbored no such desires for vengeance or accolades. With the enemy vanquished, he would depart without ceremony, leaving only an empty banner as a silent token. This decisive engagement is amongst the Lion's earliest battles with the Imperium and the Dark Angels proper, and it was a testament to his unwavering commitment to warfare, and it was a great representation for his disdain for the political machinations which many of his brothers had been entrenched in. His sole focus would remain exterminating the enemies of the Emperor and eschewing the trappings of empire building or personal glory to his other brothers. Thus, with Lionel Johnson's ethos guiding them, his Dark Angels would assume their roles in the waning days of the Crusade, gaining victory after victory. Amidst the many victories commanded by the great Lionel Johnson of Caliban, amongst the greatest of them was the Imperial compliance of Moloch, as it stands as one of the greatest testaments to the Lion's strategic prowess. A monumental endeavor which saw the convergence of multiple legions, including the Dark Angels, the Luna Wolves, the Emperor's children, along with the White Scars, and even the Emperor, accompanied by his Primarch sons, as they ventured into what would be the realm of chaos itself. As the dust settled on the events of Moloch, a veil of secrecy would indeed descend upon Imperial records, as when the Emperor reappeared, his visage seemed to bear the weight of age, yet his power seemed to have swelled to unseen heights, and with a death stroke of psychic manipulation, he veiled the memories of those on Moloch, obscuring the truth even from his own sons. But the secrets were not to be left unguarded, as the Emperor in his wisdom deployed a formidable garrison to safeguard the strange, pre-existing warp gate. Nearly 100 regiments of Imperial Auxilia stood sentinel upon this dangerous locale, their ranks fortified by the might of 3 full Legio Titanica cohorts, and amongst them At least 2 full detachments of Space Marine legionaries stood vigilant, and it is assumed that many of them were from the Dark Angels themselves, who had been entrusted with such secrets and weaponry for eons prior. Yet even as the Imperium stood poised to defend against all external threats, it seemed a shadow loomed on the horizon. The specter of a second and third Rangdang Xenocide seemed to cast a pall upon the galaxy, with a conflict of unimaginable scale and ferocity, which whispered of ancient adversaries in greater numbers than ever before. Amidst those who went to confront the Rangdang were the Dark Angels once more, their presence a beacon of hope as they became the vanguard. Them, alongside the titans of Legio Griffonicus, Legio Virtum, and Legio Caedus, would fight against the vile Xenos scum. And they would even be bolstered by the formidable forces of Xana II's Mechanicum cohorts, as they plunged headlong into the fray to finally finish off the Rangdang Xenocides. This harrowing conflict erupted in 862 M30, as a resurgence of this ancient menace, once thought vanquished, seemed to potentially threaten the entirety of humanity. With a relentless fury, the Rangdang descended upon the galaxy in the Imperium's northern borders, their numbers eclipsing all previous imaginations. It seems that they had prepared to rush the Imperium and attempt to collapse it under waves and waves of endless numbers. For a decade, the conflict raged on, as the Rangdang descended upon the Imperium's northern borders. And even when it seemed to stretch on for an eternity, the seasoned warriors of the Dark Angels, heirs to the First Legion's legacy, stood firm against the ever-encroaching tide. Their valor was a last line of defense against the annihilation of a myriad of human worlds, both those who had officially joined the Imperium and those who had not. During these Rangdang Xenocides, the Lion would carve a path of his own, as a specter of doom and retribution, hunting each and every one of the nightmarish Xenos invaders. In those early tumultuous years, when it seemed despair threatened to engulf the Imperium, the Lion stood firm, unwavering even. Unlike the radiant Sanguinius or the charismatic Horus Lupercal, he was a stoic presence which assured those on the battlefield that there was at least a singular bastion of solitary strength in the face of such overwhelming darkness. For nearly a decade, the conflict would rage, drawing in a full 9 Space Marine legions into the maelstrom and leaving a trail of devastation across the reaches of human civilization. As the toll was heavy, with each legion bearing the scars of battle, it seems that even the Space Wolves, renowned for their ferocity, mourned the loss of thousands as they valiantly broke the siege of Xana during the Rangdang Xenocides. The Dark Angels themselves, mustering their forces once more, stood ready for battle, yet not unscathed, as they themselves had faced their own trials in this crucible of war. And here, amongst the endless corpses of Xenos mounting, the Dark Angels' new legend was built, as they combated against the scourge of Xenos, lurking beyond the halo stars. Their valor reaching a pinnacle in the harrowing Third Rangdang Xenocide. Around the year 890 M30, the Dark Angels clashed in full force against the Rangdang threat, in a desperate bid to safeguard the Imperium's northern reaches from full annihilation once more. The cataclysmic battles that ensued, from the siege of Vorkask Citadel to the fierce engagements over Morkar, bore witness to the Dark Angels' incredible might, as, against overwhelming odds, they stood strong. Even though they paid a staggering price in lives lost, they were able to extract an unsurmountable toll, and winning the day even though it decimated their ranks, leaving them as a mere shadow of their former numerous glory. Rumors would swell amidst the aftermath, surrounding the Dark Angels' sacrifice in mystery. Some speculated that they sought redemption in the eyes of their new master, leading to many of them taking unnecessary risks, while others whispered of darker motives laying beneath the surface. Regardless of the truth, the legacy of the Dark Angels endured as they had conquered, and in the aftermath of the Rangdang Xenocides, the Dark Angels sought to replenish their depleted ranks, turning to their homeworld of Caliban for even more new recruits. And with the Rangdang threat pushed back, a fresh wave of new Calibanite Space Marines joined their ranks, embodying a new ethos, and with new tactics derived from their recent experience against the Rangdang Xenocides. With their new numbers, the Dark Angels re-engaged. One such fleet, under the direct command of Lionel Johnson, set its course for the world of Sarosh. Meanwhile, the Ultramarines Legion, buoyed by their upswell in numbers, stood on the verge of becoming the largest and potentially most powerful singular Space Marine Legion, with approximately 166,000 legionaries by the year 899 M30. Amidst these developments, the feud of Dulan loomed over the horizon, a shadowy conflict that seemed to test many of the Imperium's greatest warriors. As the Space Marine Legions continued to expand the borders of the Imperium, each Primarch would vie for distinction in the eyes of the Emperor. Amongst them, Leman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, harbored the ambition to outshine all his brothers. Only Horace Lupical and Lionel Johnson boasted more triumphs than Russ, and that fact seemed to gnaw at him deeply. A turning point for this came on the planet of Dulan, and this was in 870 M30, when the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels fought side by side, leading to a feud to spark, whose echoes still reverberate to this day. This was during an incident where a planetary governor by the name of Durath openly insulted Leman Russ, provoking a fury within the leader of the Space Wolves. Russ, consumed by anger, vowed to slay the man, demanding the honor of leading the assault. But Lionel Johnson, the ever meticulous strategist, had already devised a plan and was not about to yield to the command of his impulsive brother. Taking charge of the operation, the Lion would personally execute Durath, leaving Russ seething with frustration as he was denied his vengeance. Enraged, Russ would confront the Lion in a violent clash that would become legendary. For an entire solar day and night, the two Primarchs engaged in a brutal duel, their strength and agility matched in a relentless struggle. And though Russ had greater brute force, the Lion's speed and precision proved a formidable tool to equal this disparity. And eventually, their sons would mirror this duel in a tradition, a ritual if you will. For when the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves met, they would field their champions each and every time in a duel to first blood. This was a sign that even though they may fight, they were united in the solitary goal of ensuring humanity would prosper, and that no bad blood would remain between the legions. Another incident of great note would be the incident which occurred when the Dark Angels' 4th Expeditionary Fleet, once again commanded by Lionel Johnson, embarked on a crucial mission in the compliance to the colloquially known 4-3. This world, formerly under the jurisdiction of the White Scars, awaited integration into the Imperium's fold, as it seems the Lion's decision had been to heed the call of his brother, Primarch Jagatai Khan, the leader of the White Scars, and how quickly he went to his aid underscores the deep bond between these two solitary brothers, as despite their contrasting personas, it seemed they had forged a connection that transcended their differences. As Sarash, or 4-3 as it was colloquially known, was governed by a bureaucratic regime that seemed to overwhelm anything and everything that they had desired. Even though they had expressed eagerness to join the Imperium, in large part due to it aligning with their secular beliefs, the bureaucratic hurdles in what could only be noted as the singular most bureaucratic world the Imperium had ever noted harshly impeded their compliance, frustrating both imperial authorities and their appointed governor. And despite the assurances of progress, it seemed the planet's bureaucracy ensnared any movement forward in administrative red tape. It was then that the Dark Angels decided to descend upon the planet to hasten their integration into the Imperium. And coincidentally, it seemed that an insidious truth lay beneath the surface. Unknown to those within the Imperial expedition, it seemed that the world harbored a clandestine devotion to elites known as a Melachim, who were beings that existed within the tumultuous realm of the warp. This warp being dedicated cult was shrouded in secrecy, and it openly defied the anti-religious doctrine of the imperial truth, viewing it as a suppression of their religious faith, which it was, as they used the planet's bureaucracy to impede the hastening of integration within the Imperium. Amidst the diplomatic engagements aboard the Invincible Reason, it seemed that tensions were boiling, as the Lord High Extractor, representative of the Saroshi bureaucracy, unveiled a fervent and boisterous denouncement of Lionel Johnson and the Emperor himself, directly challenging the authority of the Primarch. And as one would expect, the Lion acted swiftly. Fueled by righteous fury, he silenced the dissent with a singular, fatal stroke of his legendary power sword. Yet, in the confrontation, there seemed to have been a hidden peril, as the Sarashi delegation had hidden a nucleic device poised to obliterate the command hierarchy of the Dark Angel's fleet within their delegation's shuttle. However, it was Luther, the trusted ally of Lionel Johnson, who had been stationed back into Caliban, who, with the aid of librarian Zahariel, thwarted the deadly scheme. Luther's admission of contemplating betrayal during this event seemed to underscore a darker undercurrent within the man, one which was fueled by envy and resentment festering within his heart. Following the turmoil on 4-3, where the rebellion quickly arose and was even more quickly quashed by the Dark Angels and the other garrisoned Imperial forces, lingering doubts would continue to plague the victors. While the insurgents were subdued and the weapon dismantled, it seemed that suspicions of discontent and skepticism arose regarding the ease of which the diplomats had infiltrated the defenses of the First Legion with such a deadly weapon. Luther, Zahariel, and 500 seasoned Dark Angels, hailing from both Terra and Caliban, had found themselves reassigned in almost permanent status, not in open disgrace, but as custodians on the homeworld of the Dark Angels, Caliban, tasked with safeguarding the Lion Sanctuary and with the solemn duty of recruiting and training more Space Marines to the Lion's perilous standard. This was during the twilight of the Great Crusade, where the Dark Angels now seemed to epitomize the creed of strength and excellence, remaining steadfast in their mission to further the Emperor's cause. And unlike some of his brethren, just as quickly as the Lion would arrive and complete his mission, he would move on to the next, leading from battleground to battleground, which seemed to cause even more stress between him and Luther. As time wore on, the memories of the Lion's heroic feats somewhat seemed to fade into the background, as he was not one to remain for posterity. Yet amidst the collective forgetfulness, it seemed one individual would remain ever observant of his brother's actions. This was Horus Lupercal. Despite his attempt to sway the Dark Angels to his cause and his belief system, it seemed that the Dark Angels' own stubbornness and pride functioned as a shield against his manipulations, as the warrior lodges that Horus and Lorgar worked so hard to form found no foothold within the ranks of the Dark Angels. Seeing themselves rejected by the stalwart defenders of the Imperium, unlike many of the other legions, it seemed Horus had become rather despondent due to the Dark Angels and his brother Lionel Johnson not being swayed by his charm or rhetoric, as their loyalty lay solely with their masters, the Lion and the Emperor himself. Though not universally beloved amongst the Primarchs, Lionel Johnson would indeed command great respect from each and every one of his brothers, earning the trust of even the Emperor himself, and granting him access to Terra's most ancient of armories, those not even allowed to the First Legion during the burgeoning days of the Imperial Crusade. This was a prospect that seemed to greatly unsettle Horus, and when the opportunity arose for Horus to celebrate the conquest of Olenor Prime, one of the greatest achievements of the Imperium up to that date, he would go out of his way to ensure the Dark Angels and their master were occupied elsewhere, denying them any place at the triumphant gathering, as Horus would take this opportunity to increase his chances to ascend to the esteemed position of War Master. It seemed the absence of the Lion during the coronation did not escape notice. This omission was deemed a triumph by the ambitious War Master, yet it proved to be one of his few misjudgments, as Horus was accustomed to the manipulative nature of power, and had erroneously assumed that all the figures of authority would act in accordance to his own ambitions. However, this act shone a light to his thoughts, to the Lion. Upon hearing of Horus's newfound status, Lionel Johnson remained undeterred in his military pursuits, showing neither approval nor envy. His stoic response seemed to gnaw at Horus due to being so unlike the rest of his fellow Primarchs. Subsequently, Horus's descent into treachery unfolded following his corruption on Davin, and it is speculated that Lionel Johnson emerged amongst a scant few as one of his foremost concerns. The Dark Angels were seen by the Luna Wolves as formidable both in number at this point and martial prowess, wielding weaponry and psychic abilities nearly unparalleled by their peers. Moreover, their Primarch stood as an unyielding bastion of loyalty, one only paralleled by Sanguinius and Dorn, all of which were prepared to confront any threat to the cause of Imperial unity with resolute and grim determination. Amongst the Primarchs, the War Master harbored no ordinary fear, yet the prospect of confronting the Lion in open conflict gave him pause. Should Lionel Johnson refuse allegiance to the traitorous cause, he would become an obstacle of priority to be eliminated. 3 Space Marine legions stood in the path of Horus's treachery before its inception, and while he sought to co-opt the White Scars and to annihilate or corrupt the Blood Angels as soon as possible, his intentions toward the Dark Angels were different. Horus aimed to exile them as long as possible, ensuring that they would remain distant until his dark designs were fully fulfilled. However, it seems that fate had other plans, as he would fail on all regards. The White Scars would never join him, the Blood Angels would battle on Terra against him, and the Dark Angels would reap a furious vengeance upon the War Master's forces. And even though he had been functionally exiled to one of the furthest reaches of the Imperial front lines, the Lion would re-emerge within the Imperium, relentless and resolute, as the Dark Angels would emerge during the Horus Heresy, as formidable, semi-independently functioning forces, conducting large-scale campaigns through isometric warfare and the use of superior firepower and tactics. Horus had been well aware of the potential threat posed by the Dark Angels, so he had orchestrated a series of deployments to the fringes of the Imperium, desiring to prevent their intervention in his schemes, at least temporarily. However, as the conflict unfolded, the Dark Angels proved themselves their betters, as they struck fear into their enemies. Even the Night Lords were terrified at Thramas, as the Dark Angels unleashed devastation upon those who had terrorized this southern galactic zone, leaving a trail of crushed traitor worlds in their wake. During the 200th year of the Great Crusade, it seemed that the Dark Angels found themselves in a crucial campaign set up by the War Master himself as a distraction during the year 998 M30, as they had been aimed towards a confederation of human worlds who had allied with Xenos of questionable allegiance. And over the span of 7 Terran years, from 998 M30 to 05 M31, the Dark Angels had been immersed in an arduous campaign. However, eventually news would reach their high command. It seemed that the War Master Horus, along with several Primarchs including Angron, Mortarion, and Fulgrim, had renounced their loyalty to the Emperor. Information about this betrayal and the horrific atrocities committed on Isstvan III, where loyalist Astartes were mercilessly eradicated by virus bombing, reached the ears of the Lion himself. In this mass upheaval, Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels suspected a deeper scheme would be at play. He believed that their deployment to the Shield Worlds in this campaign had been a calculated move by Horus to scatter the loyal forces of the Imperium, also noting how his brother Sanguinius had been essentially set to the opposite side of the galaxy. Nevertheless, the Emperor's response was swift, as a strike force was comprised of 7 full Space Marine legions, which were dispatched to the Isstvan system in order to confront Horus head-on. As they closed in on Isstvan V, the stakes could not have been higher, as the fate of the Imperium seemed to hang in the balance. In the aftermath of Horus's multiple betrayals, Lionel Johnson found his forces still deeply entrenched, no matter how hard he tried, within the shield worlds of the Gordian League, rendering a swift response as necessary to deal with this daunting task of the unfolding treachery. The Lion's initial assessment projected that he would require nearly 8 solar months to properly disengage from the ongoing offensive operations and realign for a potential strike against Isstvan V. However, recognizing the urgency of the situation, the Lion devised a daring plan, which, despite the logistical challenges that would come of it, he believed he could succeed, as he chose a select group of highly trained forces that could potentially achieve what a legion could not, if forced to operate under a singular combined goal. The orders would be issued to mobilize the Dark Angels' reserve squadrons within the Termgrass system as their assigned destination. Their primary objective was the strategic forge world of Dammit. It was imperative, in his view, to prevent Horus from obtaining the vast arsenal needed to fortify Isstvan V against the impending loyalist assault. The Lion himself would personally lead this expedition, commanding a battle group comprised of 15 formidable warships, secrecy becoming paramount as the Dark Angels prepared for their secretive mission. This was in large part due to the Lion being acutely aware of the possibility of enemy agents tracking their movements, as the stakes were high, as within this formidable forge world lay some of the most powerful siege engines ever created, the Ordinati, capable of shattering even the most impregnable of fortifications, conceivable by Dorn himself, arriving swiftly within the system in a mere few days due to how quickly he had reacted after the Dark Angels found themselves in a pivotal encounter, decimating the forces of Horus at the Xanthus starport. The admiral of the War Master's fleets were faced with the formidable Astartes of Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels' Primarch's cunning tactics, as they realized that there was no viable path to secure the coveted siege machines themselves, and faced with an unassailable obstacle, retreat became the only recourse. A bitter acknowledgement of their defeat and the thwarting of the War Master's plans, as it seemed, even with his brief presence on the battlefield, the Lion had proven himself the War Master's better. It was in this wake of this tactical triumph that Lionel Johnson convened with Perturabo, the Primarch of the Iron Warriors Legion, aboard his flagship, the Invincible Reason. It seems that Perturabo had been chosen to be the bearer of grim tidings, revealing the arrival of the 4th Legion in the Isstvan system, as he was supposedly poised to confront Horus himself, as he informed the Lion of Ferrus Manus and his Iron Hands Legion surging ahead in order to meet the Emperor's children and bring retribution unto the War Master. Through this whole meeting, it seemed that Perturabo was successful in masking his true intentions, as he spun a tale of logistical necessity, feigning desire to replenish his vessel at the now raised Xanthus starport, before pressing onward into the fray. Yet it seems, with the truth, or what seemed to be the truth, laid bare, the Dark Angel's decisive actions had dashed his plans. Perturabo would proceed to probe the Lion regarding his discovery of the Ordinati siege engines, which led to the Lion revealing a glimpse into his meticulously laid out plan, and how he had discovered these great weapons while reviewing records of the Great Crusade's history, which had been concealed in a message from Horus to the Emperor himself. And it seems that Perturabo's gambit worked, as the Lion entrusted the Lord of Iron with the retrieval of these potent siege engines. And this was where the Lion's path would once more diverge, leading him once more to staging operations from the Gordian League's shield worlds, rather than outright confronting Horus and the traitorous forces, much like his foolhardy brother Ferrus Manus had done. And seeing the fate of the first Primarch slain during the Heresy, it was a smart choice. In the murky aftermath of the Dropsite Massacre and the initiation of Horus's treachery, it would be noted that Conrad Kurz, the harbinger of terror for the Imperium, would be set towards the distant reaches of Singasla, a desolate world veiled in the shadows of a looming asteroid belt. And amidst the chaos of obscurity, the Night Lords would prepare to unleash a campaign of terror and bloodshed, heretofore unseen upon the unsuspecting strongholds of Hurldar and Thormas. Their mission was simple: to secure the flanks of the War Master's impending strike upon Terra, lest the tide of rebellion falter against the resolute defenders of mankind's throne world. Amidst this system, it seemed loyalties wavered between the Emperor and the traitorous War Master, leading to the Dark Angels finding themselves engaged in protracted conflicts known as the Thramas Crusade. For nearly 3 grueling years, the fate of one of the Mechanicum's greatest forges hung in the balance. Their allegiance was a prize coveted by both sides during the galactic struggle. In a calculated maneuver to sway the Lion to the side of treachery, the Night Haunter, Conrad Kurz, orchestrated a clandestine rendezvous on the desolate planet of Sangulsla. A deep void beacon would be launched, which guided the Dark Angels on the path towards the planet. And with the stage set, the two Primarchs, accompanied by their stalwart vanguards conveyed upon the soil of the world. Initially, the discourse came with a semblance of civility, masking the underlying currents of tension between the two. Yet beneath the veneer of diplomacy, animosity simmered, and ancient grudges came to the surface. As words turned into actions, accusations became blows. As the fragile facade of camaraderie shattered, and outright conflict began between the two titans. The confrontation between the Night Haunter and Lionel Johnson reached a crescendo of violence as the two were entrapped in an all-consuming melee where ancient grudges and bitter resentments were fueled by the flames of conflict. As the Night Haunter sought to extinguish the life of his former brother, the Lion found himself ensnared in the grasp of a deadly embrace. Yet in a moment of heroic intervention, a valiant Dark Angel plunged his blade deep into the back of the Night Haunter, saving his Primarch from certain demise and ensuring the continuation of the Imperium through his actions. As amidst the now ignited combat between both legions, the wounded Primarchs were whisked away from the fray, their survival ensuring the continuation of their bitter struggle for dominance within the Aegis subsector. It would be on the tumultuous year of 8M31 when a cryptic message whispered throughout the void reached the ears of the Dark Angels, their astropathic choir noting the movements of the traitorous forces, prompting the swift mobilization of the First Legion. Arriving at the Adeptus system, the Dark Angels intercepted an ongoing conflict between the Iron Hands 98th Clan Company under Counselor Larmach and one of the most formidable Death Guard contingents within the Legion, led by the nefarious First Captain Callus Typhon. At the heart of this bloody struggle lay an ancient artifact, the Tachula Engine, a semi-sentient relic steeped in both mystery and power, an ancient device part of a trio alongside the Ouroboros and its nameless counterpart, which promised the ability to bend and bow the fabric of reality itself, waving threads of temporal energy in order to traverse the vast expanse of space itself, almost completely obfuscating the need to travel throughout the warp. And this was the coveted prize that both legions were so desperate to claim. Sensing the looming threat posed by the Dark Angels, both factions quickly withdrew from the battlefield at the behest of the Lion's merciless gaze. And it seemed that this was the opportunity the Lion required to further his own agenda, capturing the engine for the Dark Angels' cause. In a controversial act of defiance, the Lion decreed the annihilation of Perditas, a decision met with incredulity from both friend and foe alike, as he harnessed the arcane powers of the engine to guarantee none other would threaten the Imperium with such a weapon. They embarked on a perilous journey, absconding through sectors of the warp, and essentially ignoring many of the entities lurking deep within the Imperium. And now it seems that the Lion would break another oath. In defiance of the Emperor's decree, Lionel Johnson resurrected the Order of Librarians within his legion, commanding them to unleash their psychic powers to combat the malevolent entities that plagued the Imperium. Yet it seemed that this bold move ignited some dissent within his ranks, due to him challenging the sanctity of the Emperor's edicts. As tension boiled, the Lion, in a fit of fury, confronted and ultimately struck down Chaplain Namail, an act which underscored the tearing schism within the Legion. And eventually, the Lion would encounter a demonic entity known as Kairos Fateweaver, an emissary of Tzeentch, the architect of fate. And in a battle of will and ideologies, where the greater demons sought to ensnare the Primarch's Legion to the web of chaos, the Lion stood undeterred, unwavering in his devotion to his father. With a righteous fury burning in his eyes, he would go on to vanquish the Lord of Change, piercing its twisted form with his righteous blade. In a final contemptuous taunt, the Lion would mock the demon's supposed omniscience, challenging the fabric of fate itself, and showing that he could change his own destiny. Thus the Lion's actions left him as a solitary beacon within the darkness of treachery. Utilizing the engine a second time, the Dark Angels executed a meticulously planned ambush on the Night Lord's fleet while it was transitioning from the subsector itself. This assault saw the Night Lords suffer a crippling defeat, that left their Primarch, Conrad Kurz, mortally wounded after facing his brother, Lionel Johnson, in brutal combat once more. Thanks to the Legion's strategic acumen and superb execution, the Night Lord's fleet was all but decimated, losing a total of 12 capital ships and approximately 1/4 of their Legion's fleet, proper to the Dark Angel's relentless assault. However, the Night Lords did manage to flee once again, with their critically injured Primarch in tow, thereby denying the Lions satisfaction at ending Kurz's life, once and for all. In the aftermath of this, as Kurz recovered, he would launch a desperate counterattack alongside his first captain, Sevatar, and an elite cadre of Atramatur Terminators, led by himself in a daring boarding action, attempting to strike at the Dark Angels within the Invincible Reason. The ferocity of this assault resulted in the deaths of over 12 Terminators and the capture of Sevatar, along with whatever surviving remnants of Night Lords were left. This desperate move underscored the Night Lord's tendency for ruthlessness, and despite being Astartes being one of the less combat-effective legions. Despite some losses, the Dark Angels emerged as fully victorious. Yet, Conrad Kurz was able to flee the Lion's wrath, evading the Dark Angels for several months as he hid within the shadows of the bowels of the Invincible Reason, within the Lion's very own flagship, all the while spreading bursts of terror upon the mortal crew, as the Night Lord's Primarch methodically killed every single hunter team dispatched by the Lion to track him down. After losing several squads of Dark Angels, the Lion took it upon himself to take up the hunt and search for his psychotic brother. Meanwhile, the remaining Night Lord captives orchestrated a daring escape, as they successfully slipped into the void, evading the Dark Angel's grip. As the galaxy had now been rent asunder due to the Ruin Storm, which was a cataclysmic warp storm that blotted out the light of the Astronomicon, rendering warp travel nearly impossible for all, splitting the Imperium in twain, all after the harrowing Battle of Calth. The Dark Angels realized that they were unable to directly return to Terra in order to aid in its defense, even with the powerful T'Chula engine at their disposal. As the Ruin Storm raged on, Loyalist forces had to adapt to a new reality, one where the Imperium was divided, as the Dark Angels were cut off from their brothers and the Emperor, faced with the daunting task of navigating the fractured galaxy while continuing their operations opposing the traitorous legions. Miraculously, the First Legion managed to lock onto a beacon of an alien device known as the Ferris, located within the world of Slotha. This beacon allowed the Dark Angels to safely navigate the warp in order to reach the capital world of the realm of Ultramar, Macragge. Upon their arrival, they were greeted by the now haggard and frustrated Primarch Reboot Guilliman and Sanguinius, whose warriors had also been guided to the realm of Ultramar via the Ferris. The convergence of the three Primarchs set the stage for a pivotal moment in the Horus Heresy, one which would largely remain unremembered. Recognizing the necessity to continue fighting against the traitors and safeguarding what remnants remained of the Emperor's vision, the three leaders formed Imperium Secundus, what would eventually become an unremembered empire, as Guilliman proclaimed Sanguinius as the rightful heir to the Emperor, declaring him the new ruler of this emergent empire. Lionel Johnson was then appointed as the Lord Protector, in essence, the equivalent of the role of War Master, making him the supreme commander of all military forces within Imperium Secundus. Unfortunately, despite the promising start and the solid foundation of Imperium Secundus, this would be marred by the actions of Conrad Kurz, who had finally escaped the Invincible Reason and began a campaign of terror across Macragge. His goal was simple: to sow as much fear and disruption as possible within the new realm. In this critical juncture, the efforts of Guilliman, Sanguinius, and the Lion to establish a bastion of hope and a final home for humanity were continuously tested by the insidious actions of their renegade brother, who, while not the best combatant, was a master of asymmetric warfare and terror tactics. Eventually, both Guilliman and the Lion confronted Kurz, yet their attempts to kill him were unsuccessful, as the Night Lord's Primarch had laid a cunning trap. He had brought down an entire chapel upon the two Primarchs through the use of a series of planted explosives, allowing him to flee the scene. The Lion and Guilliman were only saved through the direct intervention of the Loyalist Iron Warrior, Warsmith Barbarus d'Antioch, who was communicating with Guilliman at the time of their attack through a portal he had opened with the Ferris. On instinct, the Warpsmith would reach out across the portal and pull the two endangered Primarchs safely to Sotha. Feeling directly responsible for the Night Lord's rampage on Macragge, the Lion continued to obsessively haunt his wayward brother for the next 2 years. In 011 M31, the Lion finally had a slim lead on his brother's whereabouts within the Zaphas system, which had fallen to the combined efforts of the Word-Bearers and the World Eaters during their Shadow Crusade. The relentless pursuit of Kurz showed that the Lion truly found him as a preeminent threat, as he seemed to prioritize him over all his traitor brothers. The only issues seemed to arise as the Lion had to navigate the labyrinth of political and military landscapes which had been shaken up due to the Horus Heresy, as his relentless hunt now led him to a battleground controlled by the dark forces of the Word-Bearers. Farith Rildos, a lieutenant-elect of the Dark Angel's Deathwing, would eventually be charged with leading the hunt for Conrad Kurz himself on the word of Zephath. The Dark Angels quickly uncovered the horrors perpetrated by the Word-Bearers Legion, as their dark rituals on the planet emphasized how far they had fallen, as a hunt for the Night Haunter led to multiple engagements against the forces of both the World Eaters and the Word-Bearers, with clashes reaching a fever pitch on the capital city of Nementus. Here the Dark Angels would demonstrate their tactical prowess and utterly annihilate both traitor forces upon the capital, as the survivors of Nementus were left to rebuild the world on their own in the aftermath of the Dark Angels' devastating, overwhelming victory. Meanwhile, it seemed the broader campaign saw the Dark Angels divided into specialized detachments designed to target and tackle particular threats across the galaxy. Captain Ormond led one of these detachments in order to reinforce the Space Wolves against the insidious Alpha Legion in the Alexis Nebula. Another detachment, under the command of Corswain, was tasked by Lionel Johnston himself to hunt down Callus Typhon following the chaotic aftermath of the Battle of Perditus. As his obsessive hunt for Conrad Kurz drove the Lion to further and further extremes, victories would mount. Yet even the victories and the countless enemies vanquished did not leave the Lion satisfied, as his strategic acumen had been tested in war, and only wrath would stand. While pursuing the elusive Night Haunter, Lionel Johnston found himself in constant, continuous conflict with Robert Guilliman over policy decisions, particularly those regarding the security of Imperium Secundus. Their disagreements were exacerbated by the emergence of rebels on Macragge, which the Lion had been convinced were incited by the actions of Conrad Kurz. This situation would reach a critical point following the self-termination bombing on an Astartes convoy. In response to this, the Lion would implement martial law on Macragge, deploying the full might of the First Legion in order to restore order. Believing Kurz to be hiding within the rebellious Illyrim region, the Lion advocated for a massive orbital saturation bombardment in order to ensure Kurz's death. However, this led to fierce resistance from both Sanguinius and Guilliman, who opposed these drastic self-destructive measures. Instead, the Lion was forced to deploy the Legion's entire Deathwing, in particular, one which had been well versed in siege and close quarters combat, in order to flush out Kurz and all the rebels. This conflict culminated in the assault on the city of Alma-Mons, where the Lion finally cornered the Night Lord's Primarch. The ensuing confrontation was brutal, as Kurz used his ability of foresight in order to predict the Lion's next move, but it seemed, once again, the Lion would be able to defy fate, changing the path of his blade, altering history with a single stroke of his mighty sword. After a fierce struggle, the Lion would emerge victorious. He would then directly demand to know why Kurz had turned away from the Emperor. Kurz's response met the Lion with chilling indifference. Why not? This exchange encapsulated the profound tragedy and divergence between the two Primarchs, highlighting the depths of Curze's fall. And this victory in Alma Mons showcased the Dark Angel's strategic brilliance, as even the ability to see the future was not able to overwhelm the Dark Angels. Eventually, the severely wounded Conrad Curze was brought before both Sanguinius and Guilliman to stand trial. Their subsequent tribunal caused Curze to only defend his actions, refusing to admit any form of guilt, as he argued that each Primarch was created with a specific purpose in mind, and he was merely following in accordance to his nature and the Emperor's design, thereby believing he had committed no crimes. Curze would further exacerbate the tensions between Guilliman and the Lion by accusing the latter of secretly ordering orbital bombardments in direct violation of Guilliman's orders to avoid unnecessary civilian casualties. These accusations infuriated the Lion, but proved to be true, as he attempted to slay Curze, yet was stopped by Sanguinius, and in a fit of unyielding rage, Guilliman would seize Lionel Johnson's sword and break it across his armored thigh. The trial of Curze revealed the deep-seated divisions even within the Loyalist ranks, and as the saga concluded, Sanguinius was the one to dismiss the Lord Protector, effectively ending the triumvirate. The Lion, while enraged, accepted his brother's decree. As he was banished from Imperium Secundus, he would lead the withdrawal of the Dark Angels from Macragge only hours later, leaving behind a trail of unresolved conflict. And in the chamber of the Tachula engine, aboard the Invisible Reason, the Lion would brood over the recent events as he continued to question his actions over the last few decades, in particular the functional banishment of Luther and the death of Nemil, alongside other actions. These reflections weighed heavily on his mind. Eventually, he would order the engine to teleport himself and Hugwin, the Deathbringer, a voted lieutenant of the Deathwing, back to Macragge. Due to having had a realization, they would arrive just as Sanguinius was preparing to execute Curze for his crimes. Interrupting the proceedings, the Lion commanded Sanguinius to halt his actions, as troops entered the room, demanding that the Lion surrender. Ready to end the Primarch of the First Legion, Lionel Johnson explained the reason for his intrusion. He highlighted Curze's ability to see visions of the future, and repeated the Night Lord's claim that death would one day come at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor. At this, the Lion reasoned that if his prophecies were true, then it served as proof that the Emperor was alive beyond the barrier of the Ruinstorm, a revelation that cast a new light on the situation they were now dealing with, meaning that the Emperor's influence could still be reached, despite the chaos of Heresy. These moments did indeed bring a pause to the execution of Curze, as Sanguinius, with his own ability for foresight, would realize the Lion's explanation and acknowledge his own continuing visions of inevitable death. When Guilliman questioned the fate of Curze, the Lion knelt before his brothers and pledged to be Curze's guardian, as Curze would remain aboard the Invincible Reason as a permanent captive, where the Lion would occasionally visit him, attempting to extract information from his prophetic visions. However, the Night Hunter seldom cooperated, and in the wake of these revelations, Imperium Secundus would be officially abolished, as the three Primarchs, recognizing their unfortunate mistake, united in a new purpose, as they would lead their legions in a bold attempt to breach the Ruinstorm to reach Terra, now certain that the Emperor still lived, due to the combination of both Sanguinius's and Curze's prophetic visions. Within the Ruinstorm, the combined Loyalist fleets encountered warp-born horrors as they heard tales of an entity called the Pilgrim, who had been spreading destruction upon the galaxy. Despite the Tachula engine, they would fail to navigate the Ruinstorm, which frustrated the Lion to no end. And during the Battle of Parian, Lionel Johnson commanded the Dark Angels Astartes with strategic precision. All the while, Sanguinius would receive a vision, revealing that they needed to return to the origin of the Horus Heresy, the world of Davin. This revelation would set the stage for the second Battle of Davin, where the Dark Angels would once again shine. In the climactic turn of events, the Loyalist forces changed their direction within the Ruined Storm. Rather than going to Terra, they went to its epicenter, Davin, where they confronted an immense demonic army on both the ground and the skies, in a historic clash. Initially hesitant, both Guilliman and the Lion harbored thoughts of obliterating the accursed world upon their arrival. However, Sanguinius surprised the Lion by boarding the Invincible Reason and bringing the still captive Conrad Kurz along with him, as Sanguinius sought to harness Kurz's own prophetic talents in order to decipher his own purpose on Davin, hoping it would aid in the Emperor's salvation. This led to the launching of a full-scale ground assault, as all three legions converged. This charge was primarily led by Sanguinius, while the Lion, seething in fury, temporarily contemplated ordering an exterminatus upon the planet and his brother. Yet in a pivotal moment, the Lion recognized that these thoughts were not his own. Unlike other Primarchs, he was able to quickly notice the influence of another entity upon his mind. Descending upon the planet's surface, it seemed the truth had been revealed to him. Sanguinius had found himself ensnared within a warp portal, engaging in a life or death struggle against one of the most powerful demons of Chaos Undivided, the demon Madiel, while Guilliman and the Lion would fight desperately to reach him. All the while above them, Guilliman's flagship met its demise at the hands of the demon ship Vertas Ferrum. Eventually, both Guilliman and the Lion would find themselves fighting side by side, their unity as brothers once again solidified, as they vanquished one of the most formidable soul-grinder demon engines ever created. After a prolonged struggle, it seemed that Sanguinius was able to defeat the demon utterly and completely in order to break free, as the Space Marines would quickly withdraw to the safety of orbit, which would lead to the decisive move to obliterate Davin by the use of cyclonic torpedoes, severing its ties to real space permanently, causing the demonic fleet to vanish utterly and completely from real space. And it seems that this was a rather fortuitous move, as the destruction caused a small fracture to open within the Ruined Storm. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Guilliman and the Lion both devised a daring strategy, while Sanguinius and the Blood Angels would press onwards towards Terra, fulfilling the prophecies of destiny that Sanguinius had viewed as the best chance of survival for humanity. Guilliman and the Lion would orchestrate diversionary attacks on the traitor fleets, allowing the Blood Angels to make it across this heavily defended sector of space, unimpeded. As the siege of Terra loomed on the horizon, a series of traitorous forces would be diverted by the Lion and stopped from reaching the throne world. By launching key attacks on traitorous strongholds, all the while having a small cadre of Dark Angels on Terra, the Lion was able to shift the forces of the traitors from the Emperor's children to the Death Guard by attacking both Chemos and Barbarous. The Dark Angels were tasked with, in essence, disrupting and permanently scattering all signs of enemy logistics and crushing their morale, in a calculated move that, while not achieving the same glories as the others, would have significant repercussions on the enemy forces throughout the Heresy. Within Terra itself, as the siege raged on, the Dark Angels on the world fought to protect one of the beacons of the Astronomicon and prevent further traitor interactions. The vast majority of the Dark Angels would be consumed by the thirst for retribution, vowing to unleash a vengeance unseen by the galaxy beforehand upon the traitors, as the majority of the Legion plunged themselves into a relentless campaign of annihilation known as the Passage of Angels, which culminated in the Lion's almost complete and total annihilation of all forces of the Death Guard upon Barbarous and the Emperor's children upon Chemos. Determined to rally all allies he could for his crusade, Lionel Johnson steered his forces towards Deliverance, the homeworld of the Raven Guard, and rendezvoused with Corvus Corax and Leman Russ. The Lion had noted the absence of Corax from the front lines of the conflict, but his concerns were assuaged by Russ, who emphasized with Corax's unfortunate situation at the time, whose forces had been vastly depleted, and was aiming to use what little he had as strategically as possible. However, they were united on their quest for vengeance, as Russ pledged his full support of the Space Wolves for the Lions campaign, deploying as many warriors as he could muster, clad in Mark VI Corvus pattern power armor. However, Corax, unable to waste what few resources he had on a campaign driven in part by emotion, dispatched only a modest contingent of Raven Guard. And despite their fervent determination and their direct attempts to reach Terra at any point, they would arrive too late, as the Emperor laid mortally wounded and the Angel slain. The fate of these two Imperial martyrs had been sealed by the hands of Horus Lupercal, and in the turbulent aftermath of the Siege of Terra, the loyal remnants of the Imperium would struggle to reclaim their shattered domain. But once again, the Dark Angels would emerge as stalwart champions in an event which would become known as the Great Scouring, with resolute and unending determination, along with no shortage of hatred and wrath. They would pursue the fleeing rebel forces, seeking to purge their taint from the galaxy. And amidst this chaos, the First Legion's path led them to Caliban, which had long been shrouded in the ruin storm, but now an opening had been made, in the dark days after Horus's betrayal had ended. However, upon their return, the Dark Angels were met with an unexpected hostility as they came under fire from their planet's own surface. Deciding to personally investigate this betrayal, Lionel Johnson uncovered a sinister plot orchestrated by his once trusted comrade and brother, Luther, who had been poisoned with the bitterness of jealousy and led astray to sow discord amongst the Dark Angels garrisoned on the planet, directly turning many of them against their Primarch, while influencing the rest to believe that the Primarch had been the one to turn traitor against them. This led to the Lion forming the devastating decision to go with what seems to be his go-to, an orbital bombardment upon the planet, shattering the defenses of Caliban in a desperate bid to root out all corruption festering within the world. Once again, going to the surface, directly into the Fortress Monastery, he would confront Luther in a climactic showdown, which should have been ended in quick order. However, much like Horus had been elevated by the malevolent forces of chaos, it seemed Luther, too, would gain such power, one which would drive a mere space marine to be able to match one of the greatest Primarchs in direct combat, as their battle would be titanic in proportions, while the very foundations of Caliban would tremble beneath their ferocious combat. The duel would rage on, as the relentless bombardment from orbit would take its toll upon the planet's crust, unleashing a catastrophic destruction upon Caliban. Despite his wounds, the Lion hesitated and even failed to deliver the final blow upon Luther, torn between the duality of loyalty and duty to a man who had been his brother, his mentor. And amidst the ruins of the shattered world, Luther would use this momentary lapse in the Lion's guard to score a serious blow, leaving the Primarch gravely injured. As the weight of his actions descended upon him, Luther realized that he would have to flee. As he collapsed to the ground, his will to fight shattered, but for the Lion it seemed to be too late, as he would disappear, ushered into the darkness by the Watchers in the Dark. And it seemed that with the loss of control over Luther, the forces of chaos would unleash their full wrath upon the world of Caliban, shrouding the planet in a tempest of warp energies, as a climactic storm tore the very fabric of the world apart, causing it to fracture and crumble, leaving only the Fortress Monastery of the Order standing amidst the ruined chaos of what remained. In large part, this was due to the formidable Dark Age of technology defensive shield barriers that the fortress had been outfitted with. Meanwhile, those Dark Angels who had succumbed to Luther's twisted influence, whether knowingly or unknowingly, turning to the worship of chaos, found themselves ensnared in the rolling tides of the warp, which would cast them adrift across the vast expanse of space and time, as they would become known as the Fallen Angels, or the Fallen, by the rest of the Legion. And the Dark Angels would then commence to venture into the remnants of Caliban, now reduced to a mere asteroid housing the Fortress Monastery. They would encounter a scene shrouded in mystery, as they stumbled upon Luther, uttering cryptic words of the Lion's fate, claiming that their Primarch had been spirited away by the mysterious Watchers in the Dark, and that he was destined to return one day to absolve Luther of his transgressions. Yet despite their search throughout the entirety of the fortress monastery, which would eventually become the Rock, the Dark Angels found no sign, not even a speck of blood, from their missing leader. Unbeknownst to his kin, the Lion still drew breath, albeit in a catatonic state of the deepest slumber, concealed within a clandestine chamber deep beneath the fortress monastery. This chamber had been veiled from the prying eyes of even his own brethren, and even the Lion himself originally had no idea that this chamber existed. There he would lay dormant, his existence sustained by the elusive Watchers in the Dark, and he would remain a closely guarded secret, hidden from all but the most clandestine of his custodians. In the wake of the Horus Heresy, a shadow would now cast itself upon the once illustrious Dark Angels Legion. With their Primarch now vanished, and their brethren on Caliban seemingly completely ensnared by the seductive whispers of chaos, the Sons of the Lion vowed to cleanse their tarnished honor by bringing each and every one of the fallen to account. However, they would shroud the tale of Caliban's fall in secrecy, fearing vengeful repercussions for their internal strife if it were to become public knowledge. In order to prevent the damning truth from surfacing, they would establish what would later become known as an inner circle, a clandestine assembly of the Legion's elite, tasked with vigilantly guarding against any signs of corruption amongst their rank, and with protecting the history of their Legion. The web of secrecy birthed an atmosphere rife with suspicion and paranoia, which would become the calling cards of the Dark Angels, an enduring legacy which would persist with the chapter to this day. And despite their efforts to conceal the climactic events of Caliban's demise, the magnitude of the disaster was impossible to fully conceal, as across the galaxy, these psychic disturbances heralded the planet's sundering. In the aftermath of Caliban's fall, the Dark Angels would begin a meticulous campaign of concealment, binding each and every remaining battle brother to an oath of unwavering silence regarding the events that transpired that day. While the narrative may not withstand rigorous scrutiny, the turbulent state of the galaxy and the Imperium offered a rather fortuitous shield, with the traitor legions emboldened near the Eye of Terror, particularly the Night Lords, who would wreak havoc with deadly ambushes. The Dark Angels themselves would engage in a relentless pursuit of their once formidable foes. Amidst this chaos, and with the loss of their homeworld, they would attack traitorous strongholds who had stubbornly endured. As rebellious planets awaited retribution, and the encroaching menace of Xenos loomed in the horizon, the Dark Angels would once more venture out into the void. In the wake of the Civil War, the Imperium was now vulnerable to the surge of Xenos assaults, with planets across the galaxy facing dire threats, with their forces rebuilding the Rock into not just a home base, but a mobile platform for which they may attack all the enemies of humanity. The Dark Angels would deploy their fleets to any distress signals echoing throughout the void, dividing their forces as they all forged alliances with other Space Marine chapters, in particular such as the Blood Angels, who had been embattled in the Cadian sector at this moment. Together they would wage a relentless campaign against the traitorous and demonic forces which thirsted to reclaim a place upon the Imperium, as the Dark Angels and Blood Angels would venture to reclaim worlds and drive the enemies of mankind to exile, leading to the rebirth of the Angels of Death in these moments. Pivotal battles such as Septon Prime led the Dark Angels Terminator companies to display that they still had the power epitomized by the First Legion, earning praise as the defenders of the Imperium's realms. However, upon their return to the Rock, the Dark Angels were confronted with unsettling revelations. Despite their beliefs that the majority of their traitorous kin had perished in the cataclysm that had consumed Caliban, it became clear that most of the fallen had survived, though the fate of the Primarch remained shrouded in mystery. The librarians would be able to detect faint traces of the Fallen's presences across the galaxy as their psychic signatures faded with each passing moment. In the wake of this revelation of yet surviving fallen angels, the Masters of the First became faced with a dilemma, one that struck at the heart of their loyalty to the Imperium. On the one hand, the dreaded potential exposure of their legion's dark past, if unveiled, could tarnish the honor of their missing father, irrevocably dismantling what little stability remained in the Imperium. Yet amidst the shadows of disgrace, a glimmer of hope emerged. The continued existence of the fallen angels presented the possibility of redemption. If the wayward brethren could all be hunted down and brought to repentance, the stain upon the Dark Angel's honor may be cleansed, and they could bear legion numbers once again. Thus, the Grand Masters of the Inner Circle would swear oaths that would reverberate through the corridors of time as long as a single fallen angel drew breath unrepentant. The Dark Angels would remain bound by their oath of atonement, condemned to pursue redemption until the last of the fallen was accounted for. Thus began the clandestine crusade that would define the destiny of the Dark Angels and their successor chapters for millennia to come. Theirs became a relentless pursuit, an unyielding quest to expunge the secret shame that stained their legacy. No sacrifice was too great, no battlefield too precious, as they would wage an unending war of repentance to erase the hidden blemish. To this day, the Dark Angels and their successor chapters of the Unforgiven remain vigilant, their duty clear to capture and or eliminate the fallen, being their most sacred and solemn obligation, surpassing all others, even if it means slaying custodians and the Emperor's most loyal. Such is the weight of their brethren that they have forsaken a myriad of battlefields across the Emperor's domain. For even the faintest whisper of a fallen demands their full focus, along with their unwavering attention. The tumultuous year of 999 M41 plunged the Imperium into chaos. Responding swiftly to this unsettling development, Supreme Grandmaster Azrael initiated a daring crusade into the Fenris system, only to find it besieged by the malevolent forces of the Warp, with the Fenrisian worlds engulfed in a nightmarish demonic incursion. Azrael faced a harrowing decision. With the relentless advance of an infernal horde, he would reluctantly sanction the orbital bombardment, much like his father, of Midgardia, a world overrun by chaos. Meanwhile, aboard the Rock, a sinister presence of shape-shifting changelings was detected, and it soon became clear that the changeling had been the puppeteer orchestrating the sinister conflict between the Dark Angels and their ancient adversaries. In the Long War, as they engaged in combat to aid the Space Wolf, it soon became clear that this was merely a part of a more intricate web of deception, merely a fragment in a greater scheme. The mastermind of this great ploy was none other than Magnus the Red, the demon Primarch of the Thousand Suns. As the demonic onslaught threatened to consume the Rock itself, a fragile alliance was forged in a manner that would allow the Space Wolves to board the Rock, if necessary. Their timely intervention and a detachment of Grey Knights repelled the infernal tide. Yet despite the shared triumph, the scars of confrontation left the once tenuous relationship between the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves more strained than ever before, due to the impropriety shown to the Space Wolves. Around the twilight of 999 M41, the Imperium was plunged into chaos once again, as relentless hordes of zealots surged forth from the hellish depths of the Eye of Terror. At the helm of this climactic onslaught stood Abaddon the Despoiler, orchestrating another one of his infamous crusades. This one would be the 13th Black Crusade. Amidst the maelstrom of battle, the keen-eyed Dark Angels discerned the unmistakable presence of the Fallen, their ancient nemesis, and elsewhere brothers, amongst the Chaos devotees. Sensing the opportunity To capture the fallen, the Dark Angels boldly commanded all the Unforgiven in the area to join them in a perilous campaign against the renegade forces. As the conflict unfolded, the Dark Angels became embroiled in a series of grueling engagements across the embattled Cadian sector. Amongst these trials by fire, they would be forced to repel onslaughts by unending demonic war hosts, led by the malevolent greater demon known as Karhonk, and they were successful as they would push back the encroaching darkness of said greater demon. However, the tempestuous nature of the warp conspired to keep the fractured Imperial forces scattered and isolated, and despite the valorous efforts of the 4th Company under the esteemed Master Kahariel, they were able to properly besiege what walls had been taken by chaos in Cadia itself. Yet they could not forestall the inevitable, as Cadia would succumb to the inexorable onslaught of chaos, as Abaddon the Despoiler would careen his final remaining black stone fortress into Cadia itself. Within the rock, the librarians of the Dark Angels were besieged by ominous premonitions, and while most of the glimpses of these futures were fleeting and fragmented, one revelation seared itself onto the consciousness of Ezekiel, the esteemed Grand Master of the Librarius. In his vision, Ezekiel beheld the full extent of the fallen, whose numbers now surpassed even the darkest fears harbored by the Inner Circle, reaching near or greater than Legion numbers. It would be revealed that Luther, the once loyal brother and mentor of Lionel Johnson, had been the one to orchestrate this resurgence of almost the entirety of the First Legion that had turned traitor, and he had also grown their numbers through countless chaos devotees. As Ezekiel's vision unfolded, the fabric of reality itself trembled, foretelling of a looming cataclysm of unprecedented magnitude. This foreboding prophecy was soon realized with the aftermath of the fall of Cadia and the 13th Black Crusade's zenith. With a deafening roar, the cosmos was rent asunder, with the emergence of the Cicatrix Maledictum, an immense tear in the fabric of space colloquially known as the Great Rift, which stretched across the galaxy like a gaping wound, as the Great Rift would eclipse even the Eye of Terror, plunging vast swaths of the Imperium into darkness and uncertainty. Trapped within this desolate expanse of the now named Imperium Nihilus, the rock, the bastion of the Dark Angels, found itself severed from the guiding light of the Emperor's Astronomicon, cast amidst the turbulent tides of the galactic void. During the tumult known as the Era Indomitus, when the Imperium grappled with the aftermath of the Great Rift and the reawakening of a Primarch, a sinister event would unfold in the hollowed confines of the rock. Amidst the waning darkness of Noctis Anthrena, the rock found itself once more besieged by a malevolent force led by the fallen demon prince Morbus, as a horde of demonic entities breached the formidable void shields enveloping the Dark Angels' asteroid fortress. What followed was a harrowing clash that echoed through the corridors of the rock, from its grand halls to even the lowest of its sublevels. As the battle reached a crescendo, the demon invaders abruptly vanished just as they had appeared, leaving behind a wake of devastation and despair. Yet amidst the chaos, a clandestine agenda had unfolded deep within the rock's dungeons. Concealed from all but the highest echelons of the Dark Angels' leadership, a secret prisoner had languished in captivity. This was none other than the arch-betrayer Luther, former mentor of Lionel Johnson. In a stroke of audacious subterfuge, this assault on the rock was orchestrated to liberate Luther from his confines, as Supreme Grandmaster Azrael harbored grave concerns that the battle had been merely a diversion orchestrated by the machinations of the fallen. However, burdened with the weight of this clandestine knowledge, Azrael was compelled to maintain a veil of secrecy, for the revelation of Luther's captivity and subsequent escape could unravel the very fabric of the Dark Angels. Amidst the mystery of the now torn asunder expanse of the Imperium, the shrine world of Darkmoor became the grim host for a tragedy of epic proportions, drawn by the whispers of their librarians, elements from a myriad of unforgiven chapters, including the Angel's Vengeance, the Consecrators, and the Guardians of the Covenant, descended upon this planet. Their purpose clear: to uncover the newly materialized fallen. Yet in a cruel twist of fate, the hunters became the haunted. It was a trap. The warp storms that had allowed their arrival intensified, plunging the entirety of the world into chaos, as the Unforgiven found themselves ensnared by a deadly trap. Upon setting foot on Dankmoor's surface, they were not merely quarry, but they were met by scenes of desolation and carnage. Once grand cathedrals lay in ruins, their sanctity violated, while the blood of innocents stained the soil. Amidst the rubble and death, an insidious ambush awaited them. Legions of demons, chaos space marines, and renegades alike lurked in the shadows, poised to strike at the heart of the Unforgiven. What ensued was a climactic battle, mirroring the intensity of those which occurred during the Horus Heresy, as a symphony of death and despair would echo throughout the history of the Unforgiven. In the wake of this massacre, the Unforgiven faced their darkest hour. From a proud contingent of 8,000 Space Marines, only a scant few emerged. Their numbers had been decimated outright by the onslaught. Yet amidst this, there was some hope. In their desperate pursuit, they had found traces of Cypher, a mysterious figure intertwined with the Fallen. The surviving Space Marines stumbled upon a hidden artifact of untold power, a secret teleportation device that offered them a slender chance at escape from the clutches of utter doom. Amidst this galactic upheaval, the Imperium found itself met with a resurgence of a new breed of warrior, the Primaris Space Marines. Rebirth Guilliman, the legendary Primarch of the Ultramarines, had risen from the ashes to lead the Imperium's forces during the Indominus Crusade, bringing with him the formidable Primaris Space Marines reinforcements, which would be a great boon to the beleaguered ranks of the Dark Angels and their kin amongst the Unforgiven. In the wake of the harrowing tragedies, Supreme Grandmaster Azrael of the Dark Angels convened an urgent council, summoning the Supreme Grandmasters of all the Unforgiven to the Rock. And through their efforts of their librarians, they were able to pierce the Great Rift, drawing in loyal sons of the Lion from even the most far-flung reaches of the galaxy to their ancestral stronghold. Even though not all heeded their call, many successor chapters would vanish into the abyss, while others became entangled in a myriad of conflicts that beset the Imperium from all sides. As Azrael awaited the arrival of his brethren, a new fleet appeared on the horizon. This was that of the resurrected Lord Commander of the Imperium himself, Rebirth Guilliman. Fearing retribution for hidden truths of the past, Azrael grappled with a momentous decision. Should he order a withdrawal of what appeared to be a legion via the assembled Unforgiven, or should he stand defiant against Guilliman's delegation? In the end, he chose neither, allowing the Lord Commander's fleet to dock unimpeded and to refill the beleaguered forces of the Dark Angels. Guilliman's arrival heralded not condemnation, but much-needed reinforcements, and it stood as a testament to the enduring bonds of brotherhood amidst the trials of the Imperium. As the Dark Angels met their new Primaris brethren, they noticed that these warriors were indeed forged from the very essence of Lionel Johnson. As they strode forth from the depths of Archmagus Dominus Belisarius Call's immense vessel, each clad in the resplendent Mark X power armor, all adorned with the hues of the Dark Angels and their successors, gathered within the hallowed halls of the Rock. Guilliman, the resurrected commander of the Imperium, convened a war council addressing the looming threats that besieged the Imperium. There, he unveiled his grand designs for the continuation of the Indominus Crusade and expounded upon his revisions to the sacred Codex Astartes. In a moment of solemn allegiance, Supreme Grandmaster Azrael and his brothers knelt before the Ultramarines Primarch, swearing their chapter's service to the newly reborn Imperium. With the arrival of Primaris reinforcements, the Dark Angels ventured into the shadows that lurked beyond the light of the Emperor's Astronomicon, facing off against warp storms in the galactic north. saving a myriad of uncountable isolated worlds. Azrael would assume command, orchestrating the response of the inner circle to the cries of distress that could only be answered by the Dark Angel's technological prowess, with ancient engines that allowed them to shift into space with more security than the average void vessel. As their relentless pursuit of justice echoed throughout the galaxy, the Dark Angels and their successors embarked once again on the eternal hunt for the fallen, their gaze now primarily fixated upon Cypher and the elusive demon prince Marbras, whose secrets may hold the key to the redemption of their ancient sins. Eventually, they would come into contact with a changeling who had sparked a rebellious war against many planets within the Stygius sector. In response to this, the Dark Angels and their unforgiven brethren rallied to confront the change hosts, standing shoulder to shoulder with the stalwart and glorious Mordian Iron Guard, along with the fierce Space Wolves. Together, they would wage war against the renegades of the Thousand Suns traitor legions. And despite the long-standing tensions between the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels, the dire circumstances demanded unity, and both chapters would acquiesce. And while individual skirmishes between champions would be inevitable, the focus remained on the larger battles ahead. Initial losses were swiftly replenished as the conflict would escalate, and it would become clear that victory was beyond reach. Only the timely intervention of an Aldari strike force from Craftworld Ulthway allowed the beleaguered Space Marines to withdraw, leaving the Stygius system in the clutches of Tzeentch's minions for now. As the bonds forged in the Crucible of combat led the Primaris to be more and more accepted by their firstborn counterparts, it seemed that unlike some, such as the Flesh Terrors, the Dark Angel would swiftly integrate the Primaris fully into the ranks. With each new addition, the chapter meticulously shaped these new neophytes to align with their exacting standards, ensuring that the Primaris would seamlessly integrate into the ranks of the Unforgiven. In the wake of battlefield exploits, a decisive choice loomed for the Firstborn: whether to embrace the transformative Rubicon Primaris procedure, and while some were swayed by the awe-inspiring physical capabilities displayed by the new Primaris counterparts, it seemed others staunchly clung to traditions, adamantly refusing to undergo such changes. Amidst this internal conflict, cautionary voices echoed, warning of the perilous risks involved. The procedure did at the time carry a very high mortality rate, promising only a grim possibility of significant casualties for the chapter. Yet for those forced into the transformative journey by grave injuries sustained in battle, the Rubicon Primaris became an unforeseen lifeline, offering a path back to combat readiness by the integration of Primaris organs. To ensure the chapter's continued trustworthiness, the Inner Circle decreed that their apothecarians would oversee the transition of critically wounded warriors into Primaris, ensuring they emerged fully integrated with their Primaris Space Marine organs. Despite the undeniability of power and the utility that would come from them, the lingering reservations persisted amongst the higher-ups within the Inner Circle regarding the former Grey Shields of the Unnumbered Suns, whose allegiance remained a subject of scrutiny, as they had served for much of their lives under the teachings and tutelage of Reboot Guilliman. Within this debate, swirling within the Inner Circle, one voice emerged of particular Interrogator Chaplain Zeref. Having served alongside the Third Company in the Callanth Expanse, his testimony carried considerable weight, especially considering his prior skepticism to the Primaris reinforcements ushered in by Guilliman. Supreme Grandmaster Azrael, custodian of the Dark Angel's most guarded secrets, weighed the argument meticulously, with unparalleled insight into the risks and rewards inherent in the decision. Azrael's deliberations were informed by understanding the chapter's history and the pressing demands of the present. Moreover, his first-hand observation of the Grey Shield's prowess and dedication in the line of battle added another layer into the discussion. Deep in contemplation, Grandmaster Azrael grappled with the weight of decision. With the knowledge of the escape of Luther and information about the resurgence and gathering of the fallen in the distant reaches of the Somnium stars, it seemed his hand may be forced. Azrael knew that every unforgiven warrior had to be prepared to confront this looming legion-sized threat head-on. This realization weighed heavily upon the decision to extend the possibility of inducting the entirety of the Inner Circle to become Primaris, and even inducting Grey Shield Brethren into the Inner Circle itself. When Azrael's decision was revealed, it sparked outrage amongst many company masters and chapter masters. Unable to disclose the full truth of Luther's escape, Azrael faced the daunting prospect of igniting a second schism within the ranks of the Dark Angels. With the ominous specter of the Fallen looming in the Somnium stars, the risk of further division could not be allowed. Drawing upon his considerable diplomatic prowess and leveraging his unwavering commitment to the unforgiven, Supreme Grandmaster Azrael embarked on a mission to test the mettle of one particular brother, Brother Aphrion, a former Grey Shield who had garnered the attention of the Deathwing, whom believed him worthy to ascend to their esteemed ranks. With utmost conviction, Azrael would advocate for his induction, and furthering for his induction into the Inner Circle itself, placing the weight of the Dark Angel's reputation squarely upon the shoulders of this lone warrior. Despite his elevated status, Azrael approached chapter masters of the Unforgiven with humility, which resonated deeply with many. His unwavering belief in this Grey Shield exemplar swayed even the most skeptical amongst them, as they understood Azrael's confidence was not bestowed lightly. Under the watchful eye, Aphrion underwent the rigorous trials, emerging triumphant. And though there were some lingering doubts from some successor chapter masters, the allegiance to Azrael would ultimately eclipse their skepticism. With this issue settled, the Dark Angels and the Unforgiven surged forth into the cosmos with renewed determination, reminiscent of the Lion's own legendary campaigns to cleanse Caliban of all threats, be they traitor, mutant, heretic, or alien alike. Amidst the turmoil of these turbulent times, the Unforgiven exhibited unparalleled coordination, which led to certain inquisitorial circles whispering of legion building, having grown into more clamorous accusations, challenging the integrity of the Dark Angels and their brethren. Yet a myriad of fervent voices now would rise in their defense. The martial prowess of the Unforgiven would stand amidst even the greatest of the Imperium, as an indisputable testament to the Sons of the Lion's strength. Their victories too numerous to tally, their honor unassailable. Amidst these debates and whispers, rumors, psychic echoes, and harrowing confessions of captives hinted at a gathering darkness within the depths of the warp-shrouded Imperium Nihilus. Tales spoke of a convergence of fallen angels in the Somnium stars, and a being who seemed to have hunted many of them down. And with the culmination of the Arcs of Omen campaigns, a monumentous event unfolded. It seemed another legend from the past had awoken. Lionel Johnson emerged from his millennia-long slumber within the depths of the rock, and unlike his brother Primarch Reboot Yeoman, whose expertise lay in matters of governance, the Lion was a warrior, a predator instinctively attuned to the hunt and the kill, and he had awakened to a galaxy gripped by darkness and chaos. As he now traversed the celestial expanse with a singular purpose, retribution. Eventually, he would meet with some of the Fallen, who had told tales of their confusion upon his attack on them, believing him a traitor, though eventually this would be cleared up. And long before news of his return echoed amidst the cosmos, whispers of the Lion's deeds circulated amongst the disparate worlds within the Imperial Dominion. From mist-shrouded passages, he emerged, a formidable figure, a guardian who effortlessly dispatched monstrous threats. Some hailed him as a cowled giant or an unforgiving knight, while others, in their fervor, mistakenly likened him to the Emperor incarnate, as his arrival often was preceded by the eerie apparition of ancient forests, materializing and fading into the ethereal realm. The true mechanism of this otherworldly transit remains shrouded in mystery, known solely to the Primarch himself. Yet as he had slumbered beneath the rock, His dreams frequently returned to the dense Calibanite woodlands of his youth and eventual conversations with a being who could only be noted as the Emperor himself. Yet ironically enough, it would not be the Dark Angels who would be the first to encounter the Primarch in full force, but rather Lord Commander of Imperial Nihilists and the Warden of the North, Chapter Master Dante, and a contingent of Blood Angels. Eventually, the Lion would gain the Emperor's shield, a weapon that would allow him to stand against the now empowered Angron, the demon Primarch of Khorne who had been unleashed upon the galaxy. And with his banishment, the Lion was able to once more take command of his sons, as he would stalk out into the galaxy for retribution against all those who dare attempt to lay claim to his father's realms.